There's this moment you do not forget. The message you weren't expecting, the change in their voice, the way their eyes suddenly feel far away. And then the words land. They're with someone else now, not in a distant, hypothetical future. Now, after everything you poured into them, after all the nights you stayed up talking them through their fears, all the chances you gave, all the ways you tried to love them better than anyone ever had. It hits you in waves. At first it's just shock, like your body goes quiet before your mind catches up. Then the questions start. How could they choose someone else when you were the one who stayed? When you were the one who listened, who forgave, who waited? You start replaying every conversation, every touch, every promise, trying to find the moment you lost a race you did not even know you were running. The hardest part is, it's not just about losing them. It's losing the story you were secretly building in your head. The future holidays, the shared bed at night, the feeling of finally not being so alone in the world. You did not just lose a person. You lost the version of you that believed your love would be enough to make them stay. And when they show up online smiling with someone new, it feels like proof that you were not. There's another layer of hurt you do not always say out loud. It is not only that you were left, it is that you feel replaced, swapped out, like everything you did could be handed to someone else without a pause. You start wondering, what do they have that I do not? Are they prettier, calmer, less too much? Was any of it real, or were you just a bridge they crossed to get to their real life? What scares me most is how your own mind turns against you. Studies say rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain, and you feel that in your chest, in your stomach, in the silence after your phone stops lighting up. Being alone does not hurt the most. Feeling like you were never really chosen does. You start asking, how do I move on when I still want the person who walked away from me? As long as you haven't closed your heart completely, there's nothing wrong with you for loving deeply. That doesn't make you weak or foolish. It just means your capacity to give is big, even if their capacity to receive was small. This isn't about shaming you for giving everything. It's about understanding why everything was never a guarantee, and how to slowly rebuild your sense of worth, your trust in yourself, and your hope that love can still be calm and mutual. Because their choice, as brutal as it feels, says more about their readiness for real love than about your value. I know it does not feel that way yet. Right now, it feels like a verdict, but what if the real wound is not just that they left? It's what they're leaving woke up inside of you. The old stories, the old fears. That's where we have to go next. That's where the healing actually begins. The silent belief, if I give enough, they'll stay. So when they left, it did not just break your heart. It shattered an agreement you never said out loud but lived by every single day. If I love you hard enough, if I stay loyal enough, if I forgive enough, you will see my worth and you will choose me. Does that feel familiar? That quiet contract you were holding, even if you never put it into words. You start so early with that deal. Maybe as a child you learned that being easy, being helpful, being impressive was how you earned attention. Maybe love showed up when you performed and disappeared when you were simply yourself. Not because anyone said, you must earn love, but because that is how it felt in your body. You learned to overfunction so you would not be left alone in the silence. The hardest part is, that pattern follows you. You do not walk into love as an equal meeting place. You walk in like you are auditioning. You become the one who remembers every detail, who sends the long messages, who understands every mood. You are patient with their confusion, their mixed signals, their fear of commitment, hoping your steadiness will eventually calm their chaos. You keep thinking, if I just keep showing up, they will finally feel safe enough to choose me. In this relationship, that is probably exactly what you did. You were the late night phone calls when they were hurting, the rides, the favors, the emotional support when their life was falling apart. You forgave the cancellations, the hot and cold phases, the way they never quite named you as their person. You minimized your needs, told yourself you were too sensitive when you felt hurt, because staying understanding felt safer than risking being alone again. And then, somehow, they still chose someone else. Or they walked away as if all that history was light and easy to put down. That moment can feel like the world's cruelest betrayal, not just because you lost them, but because it proved your secret strategy did not work. All that effort did not protect you. All that loyalty did not make you irreplaceable. It can make you question everything. If giving everything is not enough, what is left to do? But it's not just about how much you gave. It's about whether they were capable of receiving, reciprocating, and choosing you freely. Research even shows we often overestimate how much someone actually reciprocated our feelings, especially when we are anxiously attached and overgiving to people who are emotionally distant. That doesn't make you foolish. It just means your heart was trying its old way of staying safe. Love is not a transaction or a test you can pass. You cannot study hard enough, forgive long enough, or stay late enough to guarantee a result. Love is a mutual choice, made again and again, and you only ever controlled your side of that choice. As long as you haven't forgotten that, there's nothing wrong with you for wanting to be chosen by the person you chose. What scares me most for many people is not that they gave too much. It is that without the role of the one who always gives, they do not know who they are. If you are not the understanding one, the steady one, the savior, then who are you in love? That is the question we have to turn toward next. Why? Everything isn't always what they're looking for, because here's the quiet truth no one tells you. When you are the steady one, the savior, the giver, you can offer someone everything you know how to give, and it still might not be what their nervous system is reaching for in the dark. You offered stability. You offered loyalty, emotional support, presence. You stayed on the phone at night while they cried about their past. You remembered the small details. You tried to make their life softer. But inside them, something else might have been running the show. Not because you did anything wrong, but because it's not just about what you give. It's about what they are unconsciously seeking. Some people are not looking for calm. They are looking for familiar. And familiar, for them, might be chaos, hot and cold attention, the high of being chased, the low of being ignored. They might be drawn to partners who give them validation, ego boosts, distraction from their own loneliness, even if those partners give them less care than you did. That doesn't make you less. It just means their compass is still set to an old map. People do not always choose what is good for them. They choose what matches their wounds. If love has always been inconsistent, then consistency can feel suspicious. If intimacy has always come with abandonment, then someone who actually stays can feel dangerous. Your love might have been the medicine, but medicine can feel like poison when you are used to the sickness. There is also emotional readiness. To be really seen by someone like you, to sit in that kind of steady love means they cannot hide. Your presence quietly asks for honesty, for accountability, for showing up all the way. Some people are not ready to hear their own heart in that kind of silence. The hardest part is accepting that your depth might have highlighted their avoidance, their fear of real intimacy, their wish to stay half closed. So your everything may have felt overwhelming. Not because you loved too much in a wrong way, but because they did not yet know how to hold that much reality. There's nothing wrong with wanting to give fully. There's nothing wrong with hoping that if you love well enough, someone will finally stay. The pain is that you offered a future to someone who was still living inside their past. You look at who they chose instead and you feel sick. How could they walk towards someone who gives them less, who treats them worse, who seems half there, and walk away from the person who was all in? You start wondering if being calm, loyal, deeply present means you will always be passed over for the one who is exciting, distant, unsafe. You start asking if love will always mean losing, but their choice was never a fair test of your worth. It was a reflection of their capacity, their patterns, their fears. The hardest part is letting that be true without it numbing you. Because as long as you haven't gone numb, this is not the final verdict on your value. It is just the part of the story where we have to ask a different question. If their choice was about them, then what does your love deserve next? Attachment styles, why we chase the ones who don't stay. If their choice was about them, then why did it feel like it tore something open in you that had been there since before you even met them? This is where it's not just about this one relationship anymore. It's about the way your body has always braced around love, the way your heart learned to expect closeness to feel a little bit like danger. People talk about attachment styles like they're labels, but in real life they feel more like familiar weather. Secure feels like a steady season. You can text and not obsess, disagree and not panic, be alone at night without assuming you've been abandoned. Anxious feels like a constant storm warning. You're always checking the sky, reading into every cloud, afraid the person you love will disappear the second you relax. Avoidant feels like a drought you chose on purpose. You say you like space, you keep things casual, you pull away when the rain of real intimacy starts to fall. Disorganized feels like thunder and sun at the same time. You want love so badly, and yet you flinch when it comes close. If you're the one who gave everything, there's a good chance your anxious side was in charge. You start overgiving without being asked. You start explaining yourself 3 times just so they won't misunderstand and leave. You notice when their goodnight text comes 10 minutes later than usual, and you feel it in your chest like a warning. You feel responsible for keeping the whole thing alive, for fixing every silence, for proving over and over that choosing you would not be a mistake. On the other side, avoidant often looks calm but feels cornered. They like the talking, the late night confessions, the warmth until it gets too real. Then they feel smothered by your emotional intensity, like loving you means losing themselves. They crave freedom. They say they don't want anything serious, but still reach for you on lonely nights. They give just enough to keep your hope alive, then pull back the moment your needs ask to be chosen. The hardest part is how those two patterns magnetize each other. Your chasing makes their distance feel necessary. Their distance makes your chasing feel urgent. One of you is pouring out love, the other is rationing it in drops. One is saying, "Tell me I'm not too much." The other is thinking, "If I stay, I'll disappear." No one is trying to be cruel. It just means both nervous systems are doing what they learned long ago. So if you found yourself chasing, over-explaining, begging the story to end differently, that doesn't make you desperate or broken. It just means your attachment system was fully activated by their inconsistency. Your body read their mixed signals the way it once read a parent's mood swings or emotional absence. As a test, you had to pass to finally be chosen. There's nothing wrong with you for being drawn to emotionally unavailable people. Your nervous system is reaching for what it recognizes. What scares me most is how familiar this chase can feel, like home, like childhood, and how easy it is to mistake that familiarity for love. When your nervous system thinks love equals anxiety, so your body learned to love like that, on edge, on alert, waiting for the next shift in their mood the way you once waited for footsteps in the hall at night, trying to guess if the door would open soft or slam. You think you're just bad at love, but your nervous system has been training for this storm for years. Loving someone inconsistent does not just hurt in your chest. It lives in your stomach, in that tight knot that will not untie. It's staring at your phone until your eyes burn, checking if they were online, wondering why they answered everyone else but you. It's replaying the last conversation over and over, scanning every word for what you said wrong. You tell people you're fine, but you cannot eat. You lie down to sleep, but your body keeps jolting awake like it missed an alarm. Those moments when they finally text back, when they finally say your name like you matter, feel how your whole body exhales at once. The headache eases, your shoulders drop. For a second, the world feels safe again. Not because love arrived, but because the anxiety paused. Then, as soon as they pull away, the crash comes. Your chest gets heavy, your hands go cold, the room feels too quiet. The hardest part is how quickly you start to believe this roller coaster is proof that the love is real. Intensity starts to feel like intimacy. The obsession, the jealousy, the panic when they go silent, the rush when they come back. It all feels so big that you tell yourself, this has to mean something. What scares me most is how easy it is to confuse chaos with depth. Calm starts to feel wrong. Consistency feels suspicious. Someone who texts back every time. Your body calls that boring before your mind even has a chance to say, maybe this is safe. So you overgive not because you are pathetic, but because you're trying to regulate the fear in your own body. If I fix it, if I do more, if I'm perfect, then the anxiety will stop. Then they will finally choose me. You start cleaning up their messes, soothing their moods, bending your boundaries, all to quiet that shaking feeling under your ribs. That doesn't make you weak. It just means you were trying to survive. There's nothing wrong with the part of you that clung. Your body was trying to keep you safe in the only way it knew how. Hold tighter to the person who keeps leaving, because losing them feels like losing air. As long as you haven't learned another way to feel safe, of course you keep reaching for the same kind of hurt. Healing, then, is not just about changing your mind or repeating better thoughts. It's teaching your body that steady does not mean danger, that a love that does not spike your heart rate can still be real, that quiet can be gentle, not empty, that being chosen consistently is allowed to feel easy. It's not just about why they chose someone else. It's about why a part of you kept choosing the storm over the quiet, and what might finally happen when you stop. Their choice versus your worth, untangling the knot. And this is where your mind does something almost automatic. They chose the storm over the quiet, and instantly you decide the quiet must be what was wrong. You, your softness, your steady love. You start hearing one sentence on repeat in the silence at night. If I was really enough, they wouldn't have left. If I was special, they wouldn't have replaced me so quickly. That's the core wound, isn't it? Not just that they're gone, but that their choice feels like proof. They left, so you must be lacking. They chose someone else, so that person must be better. Your brain is wired to link cause and effect, to make sense of hurt so it does not feel so random. Fire burns, so we learn not to touch it. They left after you gave them everything, so you learn, my everything still wasn't enough. How could that not break something inside you? The hardest part is that your mind is trying to protect you. If it can find a reason, maybe it can stop this from happening again. So it tells you the story that hurts you most. You were the problem. Fix yourself, and no one will ever leave again. It sounds logical, almost responsible. But is it actually true? Because people do not always choose better. They choose what matches their current level of healing, their awareness, their capacity. Sometimes they choose what feels familiar, even if familiar is chaos. Think about the partner who leaves the stable, patient person for someone who screams, disappears, and pulls them back in. That doesn't mean the calm partner was less lovable. It just means chaos still feels like home to the one who left. Or the person who jumps into a rebound days after breaking your heart. Not because they found a deeper love overnight, but because sitting alone with their guilt and emptiness is unbearable. They choose distraction, not devotion. They choose noise, not intimacy. That doesn't make the new person better. And it doesn't make you worse. It just means they were running from themselves and you were asking them to finally stop. Your value is not a variable that rises when someone stays and crashes when someone goes. You had worth before they ever knew your name. You had worth the first night you cried over them. You will have worth the day you no longer do. Love can come and go, people can choose and unchoose you. But your worth is not a door they get to close. I know how hollow that can sound when you are the one left behind. When you feel lonely and replaced, your worth doesn't change can feel like a line from a book, not something your body believes. There's nothing wrong with you if you cannot feel it yet. This is not a mantra you force. It's a truth you grow into, slowly, as long as you haven't given up on seeing yourself clearly. What scares me most is how easily we let someone else's limited vision become our mirror. The person you wanted most could not see you, and maybe never did. So how do you learn to see yourself without their eyes? You weren't chosen, but you were never ordinary. So how do you learn to see yourself without their eyes? Maybe it starts on the exact day you see them post a picture with someone new. The same angle, the same smile, the same hand on a shoulder that used to be yours. Your stomach drops, your chest goes tight, and you feel that familiar mix of nausea and disbelief. How can they look that happy with someone else so fast? It is not just about the photo. It is remembering how you begged for small things they now give away freely. The good morning text you never got, suddenly showing up in their stories. The trips you planned in your head, now happening with a different face in the passenger seat. Being alone does not hurt the most. Watching them give to another what you prayed they would give to you, that is the hardest part. You start telling yourself a quiet, cruel story. If they could move on like that, maybe I never really mattered. Maybe I was ordinary, replaceable. It makes sense that you would think that, does it not? In a world where rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain, of course your mind tries to explain the hurt by making you the problem. But their speed is not a measure of your worth. The pace at which someone moves on often reflects how fast they run from their own feelings, not how shallow what you shared was. Some people cannot sit in silence with their grief, so they fill it with noise, with new bodies, with distractions that look like love. That does not make what you had fake. It just means they are not ready to face it. Your depth, your loyalty, your way of loving slowly and all the way through. These are not common traits. In a world where so many people are terrified of being seen, where staying distant feels safer than being honest, your willingness to show up fully is rare. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen with that same fullness in return. Not being chosen by them does not erase the nights you stayed on the phone, the secrets you held, the ways you softened their lonely. It does not delete the version of you who tried, who hoped, who loved as best as you could with what you knew then. The impact you had on their life exists whether they honor it or not. Maybe you were not too much. Maybe you were just too honest, too present, too emotionally awake for someone who could only survive by staying half asleep. And if that is true, what if being too much for someone emotionally limited simply means you are exactly enough for someone emotionally ready? Someone who will not need to lose you to understand your value. What scares me most is how quickly we forget our own magic when someone else is too blind or too scared to see it. Grieving the fantasy versus grieving the person. What scares me most is how we don't just lose people, we lose entire worlds with them. You're not only grieving the messages that stopped, the bed that feels bigger at night, the silence where their name used to be. You're grieving a life that never actually happened, but felt so close you could almost touch it. There are two losses sitting in your chest right now, and they're tangled together. There is the loss of the actual relationship you had with them. The real conversations, the real touch, the real nights you stayed up talking, or waiting, or worrying. And then there is the loss of the future you were secretly building in your mind, scene by scene, every time they gave you just enough to keep your hope alive. You know that future, the version of them who would finally choose you, not halfway, not when it was convenient, but completely. The version who would wake up one day and say, I get it now. You were the one. The version who would go to therapy, face their avoidance, stop running from intimacy, and grow into the partner you always believed they could be. You didn't just love who they were. You loved who they might become. But if you look honestly, that fantasy did not match their patterns. In reality, they pulled close and then disappeared. They said, "I'm not ready," but still wanted your body, your time, your comfort. They forgot plans, dodged hard talks, chose distraction over depth. They kept you almost chosen, almost loved, almost secure. The hardest part is admitting that they repeatedly showed you they weren't willing to become the person you were waiting for. When you cling to the fantasy, the breakup feels unbearable. You're not just losing what was, you're losing what you were still sure it could turn into if you just held on a little longer, gave a little more, hurt a little deeper. It's not just about missing their voice. It's about mourning the wedding you pictured, the shared home, the trips you never took, the inside jokes that never got to exist. You're also grieving a version of you that only lived in that future. The you who finally wasn't lonely. The you who was chosen openly, proudly. The you who believed, "See, nothing was wrong with me. Love just needed time." Letting go of that hurts. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means you're human. There's nothing wrong with having hoped that hard. As long as you haven't gone numb, your hope is still something sacred. It just deserves a safer place to land than someone who kept you waiting in emotional darkness. Part of healing is letting the fantasy die gently. Not because you were foolish, but because you were faithful to a story they never actually agreed to live. And maybe the next step isn't only asking, "How do I let them go?" Maybe it's quietly asking, "Who do I become when I stop waiting for the day they finally choose me?" Seeing them clearly. Who they were, not who you needed. When you stop asking, "How do I make them choose me?" and start whispering, "Who was I actually waiting for?" something shifts. The room feels different. The silence at night is still there, but instead of only echoing their absence, it starts holding a mirror up to the way they really showed up for you. So I want you to walk back through it slowly, not the highlight reel, the patterns, the nights they said they would call and did not, the plans they made and casually broke, the mixed signals that left you dizzy. One week, they were warm, talking about a future. The next week, they were distant, confused, suddenly too busy to ask how you really feel. Do you remember how often you had to guess where you stood? How many times you told yourself, "They're just stressed," when their hot and cold behavior was becoming a normal climate? Think about the moments you tried to talk about your hurt, how quickly they got defensive, how the conversation turned into you comforting them, apologizing for needing clarity. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being in a connection where your pain is always an inconvenience does. What scares me most is how easily we call that love just because we are afraid of being lonely again. So ask yourself gently, if you met them for the first time today, knowing everything you know now, would you still hand them your whole heart? Would you still rearrange your life around someone who could not even rearrange an evening for you? If a friend described the same story to you, would you tell them to keep holding on or to walk away? Because love can act like a filter. It turns red flags into challenges you're supposed to overcome if you are strong enough. It turns bare minimum effort into proof of deep care. A text back becomes a sign of hope. A half-hearted apology feels like a grand gesture. You start grading them on a curve because you're so afraid that asking for more will make you lose the little you have. Seeing them clearly is not about turning them into a villain. There's nothing wrong with them being limited. That doesn't make you wrong for loving them either. It just means their capacity and your longing never actually matched. The hardest part is stepping out of denial long enough to stop making their limitations your fault. And there is grief in that clarity. Realizing they were never going to become the person you were waiting for, no matter how much you gave, feels like losing them twice. You didn't just lose a partner. You lost the future you were secretly building in your mind. It's not just about moving on from a person. It's about burying a whole story. So if part of you still wants the fantasy, that doesn't make you weak. As long as you haven't gone numb, it means your hope is still alive, even while your mind learns the truth. The hardest part is admitting that the person you lost might not be the person you were in love with in your mind. and that's a loss all on its own. But what if seeing that clearly is the first time you're actually choosing you? The mirror they held up. What they're leaving reveals about you. But what if seeing that clearly is the first time you're actually choosing you? Because when someone leaves, they don't just walk out of your life. They hold up a mirror you can't put down. Suddenly, it's not just about them choosing someone else. It's about everything. Their leaving woke up inside you in the quiet after. Relationships do that. They don't only reflect the love you gave, the soft parts of you that showed up and stayed. They also reflect your fears, your insecurities, the old stories you've been carrying since before you even knew what love was. You think you're just missing them, but underneath that, what did their leaving really touch? Was it the fear of being abandoned again? The fear that you're unlovable unless you're useful? The fear that no matter what you do, you'll always be the one not chosen in the end? You start noticing patterns when the noise finally dies down. How you overgave. How you kept saying, "It's fine, I don't mind," while a part of you was starving. How you became their therapist, their safety net, their late-night comfort, hoping that if you gave enough, they would never even think about leaving. The hardest part is realizing that sometimes overgiving isn't kindness. It's a way of avoiding your own loneliness, so you don't have to sit in the silence and ask, "Who am I if I'm not taking care of someone?" Maybe no one ever taught you that you're allowed to receive. Maybe you learned as a child that your value came from being helpful, from calming the chaos, from needing less than everyone else. So of course you poured everything into them. It felt familiar. It felt like home, even while it hurt. That doesn't make you foolish. It just means you were trying to earn the love you should have been allowed to expect. There's nothing wrong with wanting proof that you matter. Most people use relationships that way without even realizing it. If someone texts back, "I'm worth something." If they choose me, I can breathe. If they leave, I must be the problem. But your worth didn't spike when they warned you, and it didn't vanish when they walked away. Their choice revealed their capacity, not your value. This is where the invitation hides inside the heartbreak. As brutal as it is, this loss is asking you to build a sense of worth that doesn't crumble every time someone changes their mind. To find a way of sitting with yourself at night without deciding you're wrong or broken just because you're alone. You are not to blame for their choices, but you are responsible for what you do with the pain those choices left in your chest. What scares me most is how easily we hand other people the power to decide if we are worthy of love, and how much quiet, terrifying freedom there is in taking that power back, and asking, maybe for the first time, what it would mean to finally choose yourself. You didn't fail at love. You reached your limit. When you start trying to choose yourself, the first thing that usually shows up is the loop, the replay, the late-night film in your head where you walk back through every conversation, every fight, every moment you think you should have stayed quiet or spoken up or loved them better. You lie there in the silence asking, where did I go wrong? What did I miss? How did my everything still not keep them? You start editing your own memories like that will somehow change the ending. Maybe if you hadn't asked that question. Maybe if you'd been less sensitive, less honest, less you. The hardest part is, the more you rewind, the more you stop seeing specific mistakes and start building a case that you are the mistake. Not that you hurt them sometimes, but that you are, at your core, too much, or not enough, or somehow unlovable. But there's a difference between moments you wish you handled differently and the belief that you, as a person, are fundamentally wrong. Everyone says things in anger. Everyone misses red flags. Everyone clings a little longer than they should when they are scared of being alone. That doesn't make you broken. It just means you were human inside a story you really want to work. What if the end of this wasn't proof that you failed at love, but proof that you reached your limit? Not the limit of how much you could give, but the limit of how much one nervous system can carry when it is always the one doing the emotional labor. There is only so long your body can live on anxiety, waiting for a text, bracing for the next withdrawal, before something inside you quietly says, "I cannot keep doing this." Relationships do not only end when love disappears. They also end when the cost of staying starts to outweigh the safety, reciprocity, and respect you are actually receiving. You can still love someone and know that the way you feel around them is not safe. You can still love someone and see that you are always the one apologizing, always the one adjusting, always the one bending yourself into shapes that leave you lonely, even when you are not technically alone. Staying as long as you did was not a failure. Trying as hard as you did was not a failure. Pouring your everything into a connection that could not meet you was not foolish. It was evidence of how deeply you are capable of loving. It's not just about whether they chose you in the end. It's about whether the version of you that survived that love can still recognize themselves in the mirror. And the fact that your everything still could not fix it, that is not proof that you were lacking. That is proof that there were pieces in them, or in the timing, or in the circumstances, that were never yours to fix. There's nothing wrong with wanting to hold on, but some things fall apart because they were being held together by your fear, not by mutual commitment. So maybe being left, or finally walking away, is not the punishment it feels like tonight. Maybe it is a kind of protection you do not yet understand. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, there is still hope that you will learn this. Your worth is not measured by your ability to keep what was never meant to be held that tightly. And the next part of this is learning how to stop confusing endurance with love. The empty space they left sitting with the ache. So then there's this part. The part after the decision is made, after they've chosen someone else. After the arguments in your head go quiet, and the room does too. The bed feels bigger in the worst way. Their side is not just empty, it's loud. A dent in the pillow, a space where their body used to be, and now only the weight of your own breathing in the dark night. The hardest part is not always the crying. Sometimes it's the way your phone just lies there, face up, stubbornly still. No new messages. No, "I miss you." No, "I'm sorry." You start picking it up anyway, checking apps you do not care about, scrolling just to avoid the moment you admit to yourself. The person you were always waiting on is not coming back this time. Routines that once felt like love now feel strangely wrong. Making coffee for two. Leaving your ringtone on loud. Opening their favorite show and then closing it, because the silence beside you hurts more than the episode could help. It's not just about losing them, it's the way their absence rearranges your whole day, like someone pulled a single thread and your entire life came undone. So of course you want to fill the space. Of course you think, maybe if I talk to someone new, maybe if I stay busy, maybe if we can stay friends, I won't have to feel how lonely this really is. There's nothing wrong with wanting relief, rebounds, overworking, constant noise. Those are not proof you're weak. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means you're human and you're in pain. What scares me most in myself and in you is how quickly we blame our hearts for hurting instead of asking what the hurt is trying to show us. Because this ache you feel right now, it's not just about this one person choosing someone else. It's every goodbye you never got to process. Every time you were left out, left last, left alone. Every childhood moment you felt unwanted that you promised yourself you were over, until this breakup ripped it open again. If you let yourself sit with the emptiness, even for a few breaths, you might notice something uncomfortable and honest. How much of your sense of being lovable depended on their attention? How much of your safety lived in their replies? How much of your identity was built around being the one who gives everything? You start realizing how many pieces of yourself you've outsourced to whoever is willing to stay. Healing does not need you to perform being okay. You do not have to rush back into the world with a smile that does not match your eyes. Grief is not a test you pass by moving on quickly. Grief is a process that moves through you in waves, and as long as you haven't shut it down completely, there is still hope that it will one day soften. So for now, keep it small. A short walk where you actually feel your feet on the ground. A page in a journal where you tell the truth without editing. 3 slow breaths when the urge to text them feels unbearable. Talking to someone safe, not to fix the pain, but to let it exist outside your body for a moment. These are tiny ways of choosing yourself in the middle of being unchosen. Because this part is not just about surviving the emptiness. The real question, waiting in this quiet, is harder and holier than that. Who are you when you're not busy trying to be everything for someone else? And what happens when you finally turn that kind of love back toward you? Relearning trust when love feels like a threat. When you finally stop trying to be everything for someone else, there's this strange, heavy quiet that follows. In that silence, a new fear starts to whisper. Not just, will I ever be loved? But, what if everyone leaves? What if I'm always the one who gets replaced? You feel it in your chest more than you hear it in your head. It sits there at night when the room is dark and your phone is face down and they're probably texting someone who isn't you. The hardest part is, it doesn't stay about them. It turns on you. What if I can't trust my own judgment anymore? What if I never see it coming again? You remember how certain you were, how safe you thought you were, how you defended them to your friends, how you told yourself the mixed signals were just their way. Being left for someone else doesn't just tear the relationship, it tears the contract you had with yourself about what you can believe. Your body remembers that tearing. Rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain, and your nervous system learns fast. So now love doesn't just feel warm and hopeful. It feels like standing on a trap door. You start associating affection with danger, closeness with humiliation, commitment with loss. Someone texting you back too quickly makes you suspicious. Someone taking too long makes you sick. Either way, your whole system is braced for impact, so you make promises in the dark. I'm never loving that hard again. I'm never giving everything again. I'm never letting anyone get that close. You start building walls that look like standards, but feel more like armor. You tell yourself you're better off alone, that caring less is safer, that if you act like you do not need anyone, you cannot be hurt. It's not just about being single, it's about trying to outrun the part of you that still hopes. There's nothing wrong with those defenses. That doesn't make you bitter or broken. It just means your heart is trying to protect itself the only way it knows how right now. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, the part of you that is scared is also the part that still wants love to be real. Your walls are not proof that you're incapable of loving. They're proof that being chosen and then replaced hurt more than you know how to say. But here is where trust starts to change shape. Healthy trust is not closing your eyes and hoping people will be kind. Healthy trust is learning to trust your own eyes. It's not about ignoring red flags. It's about believing yourself when you see them and acting before you abandon yourself again. What scares me most isn't that you'll never love again. It's that you might settle for half love, for almost, for at least they stayed, because you no longer trust yourself to ask for more and to leave when you feel something is wrong. Separating their story from yours. Trusting your own eyes also means seeing them clearly. Not the version you built in your head at night, but the person who walked into your life already carrying their own story. They did not start at chapter 1 with you. They came with an upbringing, with fears they never named, with an attachment style they probably never learned to language, with old hurt they never really sat with. You walked into a book already in the middle. The hardest part is, when someone chooses someone else, you don't just grieve them. You start rewriting the whole story in your mind so it becomes your fault. You tell yourself, if I had loved better, they wouldn't have left. But their avoidance did not begin with you. Their inconsistency did not appear the day you met. Their fear of being all in has roots that go back years before your first message, your first night together, your first hope. Think about the patterns you saw but tried to explain away. The way they pulled close when they were lonely, then went quiet when love started to feel real. The way commitment made them confused, not because you were wrong, but because safety was foreign. That doesn't make you unlovable, it just means you intersected with a wound that was already bleeding. And unless they choose to stop and actually heal, that same wound will spill into the next person too. What scares me most is how quickly we turn their story into a verdict on our worth. They couldn't choose you fully, so you decide you're not enough. They ran from depth, so you decide you're too much. But you are not the author of their life. You did not write the chapters where they learned to run. You are not responsible for the pages they will keep repeating if they refuse to change. So, imagine this instead. 2 threads on a table. Theirs, knotted and tangled in places you can't fix. Yours, stretched out, interrupted by this heartbreak, but not ended by it. For a while, your threads ran side by side. Then they veered off. Painful, yes, but your line doesn't stop where they left. There are chapters of love you haven't lived yet, nights that won't end in silence, moments where you are simply chosen without a fight. Being hurt like this makes it easy to believe you're doomed to repeat it. But patterns are not prophecies. Awareness is the moment the story can change. As long as you haven't gone numb, as long as you're willing to see what really happened, you can choose differently next time. You can notice the same red flags in a new face and walk away sooner, not because you're cold, but because you finally feel worth steady love. Maybe the question is shifting, not, why wasn't I enough for them? But why am I letting their old wounds decide how I see myself? It's not just about closing this chapter. It's about quietly, bravely asking, from here on, what kind of story do you want your love life to tell? The question underneath it all, will I ever be truly chosen? From here on, what kind of story do you want your love life to tell? Underneath that question, there's an even quieter one you almost never say out loud, especially at night when the room goes still and the silence gets heavy. Will I ever be truly chosen? Not just loved in a halfway, almost, when it's convenient kind of way. Not just wanted when you're useful, when you're comforting, when you're the safe place they lean on until they find someone better. The longing underneath all of this hurt is simpler and deeper. You want someone who looks at you, knows you, and still says, freely and consistently, I'm here, I'm staying. You want love that doesn't make you feel like you're always about to be replaced. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is how this experience starts to feel like proof. Proof that everyone you love will eventually drift towards someone else. Proof that no matter how much you give, you'll always end up watching them choose a different life, a different body, a different future that doesn't include you. Being alone doesn't hurt the most, being unchosen does. It's watching them post pictures with the person they picked, while you're left wondering what was so wrong with you that you were easy to leave. And you are tired. Tired of being the one who tries harder, texts first, apologizes more, forgives faster. Tired of being the emotional anchor, the late-night listener, the steady one who holds their secrets and their sadness, only to be told later that it's not you, it's me, as they walk into someone else's arms. That doesn't make you weak. That doesn't make you desperate. It just means your heart has been working overtime, without being met in return, and of course that kind of effort leaves scars. The hardest part is hearing that being truly chosen has to start with you. It sounds like another way of blaming yourself, but it's not just about loving yourself in some vague, feel-good way. It's about how you choose yourself in the small, concrete moments. The standards you set when someone is inconsistent, the boundaries you hold when your needs are minimized, the way you speak to your own heart when it's hurting. You start realizing that every time you stay where you are only half chosen, you are quietly agreeing that this is all you can get. There are people in this world who are capable of the kind of love you crave. Secure, steady, reciprocal, not perfect, but present. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, love hasn't passed you by. Your job is not to chase or convince or compete. Your job is to become someone who no longer settles for crumbs, someone who can feel the difference between chaos and care, and chooses calm, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. In the next parts, we're going to walk slowly through how to rebuild your self-worth after being replaced, how attachment wounds pulled you toward this kind of hurt, and how to open to love again without abandoning yourself this time. The question hanging in the air right now is heavy. After this, is it still possible to be truly chosen? But what if this heartbreak is not the end of your story, but the turning point where, for the first time, you finally start choosing you? When they choose someone else, what it feels like. Inside your body, that turning point doesn't happen in your mind first, it happens in your body. Before you can choose you, you wake up and it feels like your chest forgot how to be a chest. It's tight, like someone is sitting on it. Your stomach is sour. Food tastes wrong. You stand in the kitchen staring at the same piece of toast, and you feel both nauseous and empty at the same time. Nights are worse, aren't they? You lie there, and your heart isn't just sad, it's pounding, racing, like you drank 10 coffees. Your hands shake a little when their name pops up in your thoughts. Your jaw aches from clenching. Sleep doesn't come, or when it does, you jolt awake, replaying the moment you realize they had chosen someone else. Over and over, the scene loops. You start bargaining with memories, changing what you said, what you wore, how gentle you were, as if you could rewrite the ending by obsessively replaying the middle. The hardest part is how physical it feels. You're not being dramatic when you say it feels like withdrawal. You gave them your love, your attention, your daily messages, your body pressed against theirs at night. Your brain got used to those hits of closeness. Studies even show that rejection lights up the same areas as actual physical hurt. So when they disappear, when they choose another body to hold, your whole system panics like something vital has been ripped away. And then there's the urge to check. Their socials, their status, their last seen. You catch yourself comparing your face to the new person's, your life to theirs, zooming in on tiny details that only make you feel worse. That doesn't make you obsessive or pathetic. It just means your nervous system is scanning for danger and relief at the same time. Are they really gone? Was I really that easy to replace? It's not just about curiosity. It's your survival brain trying to make sense of a threat to attachment. What scares me most is how quickly you can turn all of this against yourself. You start calling yourself crazy for shaking, weak for crying, broken for not moving on fast enough. But these reactions are not proof that something is wrong with you. They're proof that you attached, that you let yourself love. There's nothing wrong with a body that screams when it loses what it thought was safe. So instead of fighting the wave, what if you learn to ride it? When your chest is tight, place a hand there and breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. Tell yourself softly, my body is hurt, not wrong. This will pass. When your mind starts replaying, gently name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear. Anchor yourself in this room, not that memory. As long as you haven't gone numb, there is still hope. These small grounding moments are not the whole healing, but they are how you survive the nights, so that in the next part, we can talk about how to heal the story underneath the symptoms, not just endure them. The story you started telling yourself the moment they left, so when the room finally goes quiet, after the replay slows down and the tears dry just enough to breathe, something else shows up in the silence. Not their voice, not their face. A sentence, a verdict. A story you started telling yourself the moment they chose someone else. It sounds like, I'm not enough. It sounds like, I'm unlovable. It sounds like, I'm always the one who gets left. Sometimes it's softer, dressed up as logic. There must be something wrong with me that they could see and I can't. You start repeating it so often it stops feeling like a thought and starts feeling like a fact. And that's the hardest part, isn't it? Not just losing them, but losing your sense of who you are in the same blow. The brain hates loose ends. It wants cause and effect, neat and simple. I gave everything. They left, so the cause must be me. Because if you were the problem, then maybe you can fix it. If it was something you did wrong, you can promise yourself you'll never do that again. Blaming yourself hurts, but what scares me most is how safe it can feel compared to accepting that someone else's choices were never in your control. It's not just about this one person. Listen closely to the words you use. I'm always the one who gets left. No one ever chooses me. That doesn't come from a single breakup. That comes from echoes. From the parent who was there but emotionally far away. From the friend group where you were the backup plan. From the first person you loved who kept you in the almost zone while they dated other people. This story is old. They just pressed on the bruise that was already there. There's nothing wrong with you for going there. The story that you're unlovable might be the only way your younger self could explain why you felt so alone. Children don't think they're inconsistent. They think, it must be me. So when this person left and chose someone else, of course your mind reached for the oldest explanation it knew. It just means the wound is deeper than this relationship, but thoughts are not laws written into the sky. I'm not enough is a sentence, not a destiny. I'm unlovable is a belief, not a diagnosis. As long as you haven't completely fused with that story, there is space to question it later. For now, I'm not asking you to argue with it. I'm asking you to notice it. To hear the line that plays in your head and whisper, oh, there you are. Can you hold that story the way you would hold a scared child at night without needing to prove it right or wrong yet? In the next part, we'll gently start to ask where these sentences came from and whether they deserve to keep deciding what kind of love you're allowed to hope for. The comparison trap. Why their new person feels like proof. You lost, those sentences don't stay politely in your head, do they? They go looking for proof. So one night you find yourself on their page, then on the new person's page, scrolling in the glow of your screen like you're searching for the scene of a crime. You zoom in on smiles, outfits, trips. You notice their hair, their body, their friends, the way they pose. You read every caption twice. You start comparing everything you gave with everything you imagine this person is. If they're softer, you tell yourself you were too much. If they're louder, you tell yourself you were too quiet. Every difference becomes a verdict. They're what your ex wanted, and you were what they tolerated. The hardest part is, it doesn't feel like you're just looking. It feels like you're on trial. Their new person becomes the evidence box you keep rifling through at night. You don't see a stranger on a screen. You see, this is why I wasn't chosen. This is what I'm not. You don't ask, who are they? You ask, what's wrong with me? But your mind isn't neutral here. It's scared and hurt and trying to protect you from ever feeling this lonely again. So it cherry picks. It highlights everything that touches your old insecurities and quietly deletes anything that might comfort you. If you always feared you weren't attractive enough, you'll stare at their face until you almost forget your own. If you always feared you were too emotional, you'll imagine them calm, easy, low maintenance, even if you know nothing about how they handle love when the silence hits. What scares me most is how quickly a real, complex human can turn into a symbol. They stop being a person and become everything I'm not. But that doesn't make it true. It just means your pain is using them as a mirror. Their choice of someone else isn't an objective ranking of worth. It's not a scoreboard. It's a reflection of their patterns, their wounds, their timing. The kind of love they think they can handle right now. You could have given less and they still might have left. You could have given more and they still might have chosen chaos over calm. That doesn't make you wrong. There's nothing wrong with wanting to understand, with wanting to know why. It's not just about jealousy, it's about trying to make the hurt make sense. So how do you step out of the comparison trap when it feels almost addictive? You start very small. You tell yourself, I can look for 5 minutes and then I will stop. You set a timer. When it goes off, you whisper, I know you want more, but this is hurting us. Like you're talking to a shaking part of you, not a disobedient one. When you catch yourself spiraling, you practice a gentle script. Of course I'm comparing. I was replaced. Anyone would feel this. But this page can't tell me my worth. Then, instead of refreshing their stories, you put a hand on your own body. Feel your chest rise, your feet on the floor, the weight of your loneliness without trying to fix it with more information. As long as you haven't blocked every feeling, there is still hope. You can redirect your attention, even for 30 seconds, back to what you need in this moment. Water, a shower, a walk, a friend, sleep. Comparison says, study them. Healing says, come back to you. In the next part, we'll look at the deeper belief underneath all this, the quiet fear that being replaced means you're fundamentally less lovable, and how to slowly loosen its grip. Grieving the fantasy, the relationship. You thought you were building that quiet fear that you're less lovable, shows up in another way too. It's not just about losing them, it's about losing the life you were quietly building in your head with them, piece by piece, night after night. You were not just in a relationship, you were in a story. Holidays you hadn't spent yet. Dinners in a kitchen you never moved into. The way their face would look a little older next to yours. You start to realize you're not only grieving their absence in the bed, or the silence on your phone. You're grieving the trips you never took, the kids you maybe named in your notes app, the way you imagine introducing them as my person at some future party. You're grieving inside jokes that would have been funnier with time, anniversaries you never reached, the version of you that finally wasn't alone anymore. Losing them hurts, but losing the future you thought you were chosen for can feel unbearable. The hardest part is your brain doesn't really separate the real from the imagined. Emotionally, it falls both under, this is my life now. When you picture next Christmas with them enough times, your nervous system invests in it as if it already happened. So when they leave or choose someone else, your body reacts like you just lost years of memories, not just one relationship. That's why the pain feels so disproportionate, so endless. You're not overreacting. You're experiencing multiple losses at once. And if you're someone who overgives, that invisible grief is even heavier. Because your giving came with a quiet contract you never said out loud. If I love this hard, it will turn into forever. You cooked, you listened, you stayed up through the night, you forgave, you waited. Maybe they never promised forever, but your hope did. So when they walked away, it didn't just feel like a breakup. It felt like betrayal. Like reality broke a promise you thought love had made you. What scares me most when I look back at my own patterns is how much of that future I carried alone. How much I was building in my head while they were still half in, half out. Research even shows we tend to overestimate how much the other person reciprocated. And that doesn't make you foolish. It just means you cared deeply, maybe more deeply than they were able to. There's nothing wrong with grieving that fantasy, missing the wedding you never had, the home you never shared, the ordinary mornings you never got to wake up to together. That doesn't make you dramatic or weak. It just means your heart was already living there. So instead of pretending you're only sad about the person, you might try something gentler. Write down the futures you're actually grieving. The trip you thought you'd take next summer. The way you imagine calling them when something good happened. The feeling of finally not being lonely in a crowd. Not to torture yourself, but to honor how much love you were holding. To see, in black and white, what you were willing to offer. As long as you haven't gone numb, this grief is proof your capacity for love is still alive. In the next part, we'll talk about what to do with that capacity now, how to slowly take that future back from them, and start building a life that doesn't depend on being chosen to feel real. Who they really were versus who you needed them to be. So now that you've seen how much love you were carrying, we have to look at something even more tender. Who they really were, not just who you needed them to be. This is the part we usually skip because the hardest part is admitting that the person you lost might not be the person you were holding in your mind at night. Can you remember the first time they pulled away and you felt that drop in your stomach? The delayed replies that turned into whole days of silence. The way they said, "I'm just bad at texting," while somehow managing to post and talk to everyone else. The moment they said, "I'm not ready for anything serious," but still reached for your hand under the table. You felt the confusion, didn't you? And then you explained it away so you would not feel alone again. It's not just about what they did when things were good. It's about the pattern when things got real. They shared secrets at 2 a.m., but disappeared when you needed them at 2 p.m. They let you support them through their hurt, but when your pain showed up, they suddenly felt overwhelmed. Research on unrequited love says we often overestimate how much the other person reciprocated. You didn't imagine everything, but you did have to stretch the good moments to cover the empty ones. If you grew up with love that felt inconsistent, you start mistaking intensity for safety. Attachment wounds make you cling to potential instead of patterns. You replay the rare nights when they were soft and present, and push aside the many mornings they were distant, distracted, or casually unkind. You tell yourself, they're just stressed, they're scared, they've been hurt. There's nothing wrong with seeing someone's pain, but when their pain becomes the reason you accept your own, something in you is being asked to live on crumbs. Who did they actually show you they were? Someone who kept you almost chosen. Someone who liked your love, but not your needs. Someone who could be tender in private, but non-committal in public. And who did you hope they would become if you just loved them enough? The partner who finally chooses you, the one who wakes up one day and says, "I see it now. It was you all along." That doesn't make you foolish. It just means your heart was trying to survive with the story it had. What scares me most is how easy it is to rewrite history in their favor and against yourself. So try this, gently. 2 columns on a page. On one side, things they really did / said, the canceled plans, the "I'm confused," the flirting with others, the way you cried alone after another half answer. On the other side, things I was hoping they would eventually be: consistent, proud to choose you, emotionally present, safe. As long as you haven't gone numb, this isn't about shaming past you. It's about giving yourself proof that the mismatch was real, so the next version of you can choose differently. In the next part, we'll talk about how to stop chasing that potential in new people, and how to recognize the kind of love that doesn't need you to shrink to be chosen. The hardest part, accepting that your love couldn't save them. You stop chasing potential in new people, but there's another layer you keep circling without touching. The part where you have to face this one sentence that keeps you up at night. My love couldn't save them. You replay everything you gave, every late night call, every second chance, and it still feels impossible that all of that wasn't enough to make them stay. The hardest part is admitting you carried a secret hope the whole time. The hope that if you just loved them deeply enough, consistently enough, unconditionally enough, something inside them would finally soften. That if you held all their hurt with both hands, they would look at you one night and realize, this is it, this is home, I'm done running. You weren't just loving them, you were trying to teach them how not to leave. It's not just about this one person either. For a lot of us, that fantasy started a long time ago. Maybe you were the child who learned to earn love by being the caretaker, the strong one, the calm one in a house that never felt safe. Maybe you were the friend who listened to everyone's pain at 2 a.m., the one who never let anyone see you break. When that's your story, of course the belief is seductive. If I can fix you, you won't abandon me. If I'm needed, I won't be left alone. What scares me most is how noble it can look from the outside. You being patient. You understanding their trauma. You reading about attachment, explaining why they pull away. Telling yourself they just need more time. Research would say their readiness, their capacity, their choices were never in your control. But in the silence after they chose someone else, it still feels like a personal failure, doesn't it? Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You could have done everything right, and they still had the right to walk away. Their wounds were not a test you were supposed to pass. Their confusion was not a puzzle you were meant to solve. Someone else's healing is not owed to your love, no matter how pure your intentions or how big your heart. That doesn't make you weak. It just means you were trying to do a job that was never yours. You weren't meant to be both partner and therapist, both lover and healer. You start disappearing when you live like that. Your needs go quiet. Your loneliness gets explained away as empathy. You call it love, but it's really fear of being unchosen again. There's nothing wrong with wanting to support the person you love. There is something wrong when saving them becomes the only way you feel worthy of being chosen. Stepping out of that role is not abandonment. It's an act of self-respect. You are allowed to say, I can walk beside you, but I cannot walk for you. As long as you haven't gone numb, this realization will hurt. It will feel wrong to put down a responsibility you've carried for years. But this is how you make room for a different kind of love, the kind that doesn't need you to be a savior to stay. In the next part, we'll talk about how to grieve that savior fantasy and how to trust that being loved for your whole self is safer than being needed for your sacrifice. When being chosen becomes your proof of worth grieving, that savior fantasy is hard because underneath it, there was another fantasy too. That one day, someone would finally look at you and choose you so clearly, so loudly, that all your doubt would go quiet. You were not just hoping for love. You were hoping for proof. Proof that you were never the problem. Proof that you were finally enough. You imagine it, even on the nights you swear you are done. The hand held in public without hesitation. The soft introduction, "This is my person," said in front of friends, not just in late night messages. No hiding, no almost, no, we're not labeling it yet. You do not just want to be loved in private. You want to be chosen in the open, where everyone can see. Because somewhere along the way, being chosen became the way you measure if you are worth anything at all. The hardest part is, this did not start with them. It started in smaller rooms, at the dinner table when a sibling's achievements filled the conversation, and your quiet efforts were treated like background noise. In classrooms where you were praised only when you performed, not when you were simply yourself. On teams, in friend groups, in families where you felt like the extra, the backup, the easy one to overlook. You start to learn a quiet rule. If you are picked, you are good. If you are not, something is wrong with you. So of course, when someone finally pays attention, you pour everything in. You overgive, you over-explain, you wait through the silence. You make excuses for their distance because their eventual choice feels like it will rewrite your whole story. It is not just about dating anymore. It is about fixing every moment you felt second best. What scares me most is how normal that can feel when you have lived a lifetime of almost being seen. That is why when they choose someone else, it does not feel like just a breakup. It feels like a verdict. It feels like your entire self was lined up next to another person and rejected. The hurt is physical, like your chest is being crushed, because your brain reads rejection like pain. You are not just losing a relationship. You are losing the proof you were secretly waiting for. And that doesn't make you dramatic. It just means your worth was quietly living in their hands. But there's nothing wrong with you for wanting to be chosen. Wanting that is human. The problem is when their decision becomes the only mirror you trust. As long as you haven't built any other way to feel worthy, their leaving will always feel like the end of you. In the next part, I want to talk about something different. What if proof of worth did not live in anyone else's yes or no? What if you could anchor it somewhere they cannot touch, so that even if they walk away, you do not disappear with them? It's not just about them. Old wounds. This rejection reopened. What if this isn't the first time you felt someone walk away with your worth in their hands? Their choice might be the freshest wound, but your body knows it isn't new. When you sit in the silence after they chose someone else, does it feel strangely familiar, like a story you've already lived through too many times? Maybe it feels like that parent who left and never really came back, even if they still lived in the same house. Or the caregiver who was there in the room but not really there with you. Eyes on their own hurt while you learned to be quiet so you wouldn't be a burden. Maybe it's your first love who just stopped answering, or the friend group where you were always the extra, the one invited last, the one they'd drop as soon as someone better showed up. You start noticing a pattern. You give everything, and somehow you still end up alone. The hardest part is, it's not just about this one person choosing someone else. Your nervous system has been keeping a record of every time love felt like it slipped through your fingers. It doesn't store it as neat stories with dates and names. It stores it as sensations. The tight chest, the spinning thoughts, the cold feeling in your stomach when you realize you're not the one they stay for. So when this abandonment happens now, your body doesn't just say, "This hurts." It says, "We're back there again." That's why your reactions feel so disproportionate, so wrong. Why you might find yourself panicking over a text, shaking, begging, or suddenly going completely numb and acting like you do not care at all. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means a younger part of you has taken over the wheel, trying to protect you from feeling that original wound again. What scares me most is how easy it is to shame these parts, to call yourself pathetic instead of realizing you're just reliving an old night with a new face. So I want you to try something gently. Imagine the first time you learned, "I'm not the one people stay for." Maybe you're 5, waiting by a window. Maybe you're 13, watching someone you love flirt with your friend. Maybe you're 20, staring at a phone that never lights up. See that version of you sitting there, alone with their hurt and their hope. Now imagine you, as you are now, sitting beside them. No speeches, no fixing. Just you saying with your presence, "There's nothing wrong with you for wanting to be chosen. You are not too much. You were never too little." As long as you haven't abandoned that younger self, you are not truly abandoned. This is where healing starts, not by erasing your reactions, but by understanding whose pain you're actually carrying. In the next part, I want to talk about how to start building a new pattern in your body, so that love doesn't always have to feel like waiting to be left. Why you keep choosing people who don't fully choose you. This is where it gets confusing, because even when you understand whose pain you're carrying, you still find yourself drawn to the same kind of people. Have you noticed that? Different face, different name, same feeling of waiting by the phone at night, wondering if you said something wrong. The hardest part is, your body is loyal to what it knows, not to what is good for you. If you grew up with love that was sometimes warm and sometimes ice cold, your nervous system learned that love comes with guessing, with walking on eggshells, with trying harder. So when someone is inconsistent now, your whole system lights up. You call it chemistry. You call it a spark. But really, it's recognition. It's your body saying, "Oh, this feels like home." And when someone stable shows up, texting back, making plans, choosing you without games, what do you feel then? Often not fireworks. Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes suspicion. Sometimes you start thinking, what's the catch? It's not just about preference. It's about a nervous system that has paired love with anxiety. So calm feels wrong and chaos feels deep. If you lean anxious, you probably chase closeness. You feel most alive when you are reaching for someone slightly out of reach. You overgive, over-explain, over-apologize, hoping they'll finally choose you. And who do you usually end up with? People who lean avoidant, who pull back when things get too real, who say they are confused or not ready, but still keep you close enough to not feel alone. If you lean avoidant, it can flip. You say you want love, but when someone secure actually shows up, their steady presence feels suffocating. You feel trapped, overwhelmed, like you're losing yourself. So you run towards people who cannot fully have you, because distance feels safer than being truly seen. That doesn't make you broken. It just means intimacy was never a place you could fully rest. This is the dance. One person chasing, one person retreating, both reenacting an old story. You start mistaking anxiety for passion, jealousy for proof that you care, unpredictability for depth. Especially if your childhood home was full of yelling or long stretches of silence, or adults who were there in body but not in heart. Calm love might feel empty to you. Chaos feels like love because it's what love looked like when you were too young to choose. There's nothing wrong with you for returning to what feels familiar. What scares me most is when people take these patterns as evidence they are unlovable, instead of seeing them as survival maps that need updating. As long as you haven't gone numb, there is still room to rewire. Attraction is not fate, it's a pattern, and patterns can change. In the next part, I want to show you how to slowly teach your body that being consistently chosen is not a threat, how to let safe people feel less wrong, and how to build a new kind of chemistry that doesn't burn you to the ground. The myth of if I were better, they would have stayed. Patterns can change, but there's one pattern that quietly hurts you the most. The way you bargain with yourself after someone leaves. You lie awake at night replaying every scene, and the sentences start lining up like a trial in your head. If I were prettier, they would have stayed. If I were calmer, less emotional, more fun, less needy, more successful, they would have chosen me. You don't say it out loud, but you feel it in your chest like a verdict. It must have been me. I must have done something wrong. The hardest part is that belief almost feels comforting at first. If it was your flaw, then you can fix it. If you were the problem, then you can become the solution. You start making silent promises in the dark. Next time I'll be less intense. I'll never bring up my needs. I'll be easy. I'll never complain. It feels like taking control back, but it's a control that costs you yourself. What scares me most is how invisible that cost can be. You look like you're growing, reading, healing, working on yourself. On the surface, it's self-improvement. Underneath, it's self-rejection dressed up as discipline. It's not just about wanting to be better. It's about secretly believing you have to become a different person to be worthy of being chosen. There's nothing wrong with growth, therapy, communication skills, learning to soothe your own anxiety, building a life you love. These are beautiful. But someone else's inability to commit or be honest or stay is not a reflection of your fixable defects. It's a reflection of their capacity, their values, their timing, their courage. That doesn't make them a villain and you a saint. It just means their choice is about them, not a cosmic review of your worth. Think about the one who flirted, texted every day, shared secrets, then vanished the moment commitment came up and showed up with a new partner overnight. Was your face, your body, your career really the deciding factor? Or was it their fear of depth, their hunger for novelty, their pattern of keeping people close enough to feel loved, but far enough to stay free? So here's a quiet exercise. For every, if I were X, they would have Y. Try answering yourself differently. If I were less needy, they would have stayed. Or maybe, if they were more emotionally available, they would have stayed. If I were more fun, they would have chosen me. Or, if they valued steadiness over drama, they would have chosen me. Notice how the responsibility shifts when you stop rewriting yourself and start telling the truth about them. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can still do this. You can still catch those thoughts in the night silence and gently turn them. In the next part, I want to show you how to keep growing without turning that growth into punishment. How to let self-improvement be an act of love instead of a desperate audition for someone who already left. Seeing their choice. clearly what their decision actually says and doesn't say about you. Growth as an act of love starts with this: seeing their choice clearly without letting it rewrite who you are. Because when someone you gave everything to turns around and chooses someone else, your mind doesn't stay neutral, does it? It rushes in with harsh translations. It whispers, "I'm less attractive, I'm less lovable, I'm less interesting, I'm less worthy of commitment." You replay their photos together at night and your brain circles the same question: what do they have that I don't? You start scanning your body, your face, your personality like you're searching for errors in a broken file. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like their decision is proof that something is wrong with you does. You don't just lose a person, you lose the version of yourself you felt like in their eyes. But what if their choice isn't a ranking system? What if it's a mirror of where they are, not a verdict on where you fall? People don't always choose the person who loves them best. They often choose the person who matches their familiar pain, their fear, their level of healing or avoidance. That doesn't make you less. It just means you were offering a kind of love they weren't ready to stand inside. Think about it. Someone who is terrified of real intimacy might choose the one who keeps things light and surface, not the one who sees them deeply. Someone with unresolved trauma might feel safer with chaos than with calm. Someone who craves novelty might chase the high of a new beginning instead of staying with the slow, steady love that actually holds them. It's not just about looks or charm, it's about patterns they probably don't even understand yet. The hardest part is you are measuring yourself against their wound. You are asking, why wasn't I enough? Instead of, what were they actually capable of? Research on unrequited love shows we often overestimate how much the other person really reciprocated. We build a story where we were almost chosen when in reality, they may have never been fully available at all. So I want you to try something simple, maybe in the silence of tonight. Take a page and draw a line down the middle. On the left, write, what I've been telling myself their choice means about me. Let every cruel sentence spill out. I'm forgettable. I'm too much. I'm not exciting. I'm not worth staying for. Don't censor it. You start healing by letting the truth of your hurt be seen. Then, on the right, write what it might actually say about them and where they are. Maybe they're afraid of commitment. They're more comfortable with distance. They confuse intensity with love. They want someone who won't ask them to grow. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can learn to hold both columns at once. Compassion for their journey and protection of your own worth. What scares me most is when you let their decision become your reflection. In the next part, I want to show you how to rebuild trust and love without making every new person pay for what this one couldn't give you. Letting yourself be angry without turning it against you. What scares me most is not just the sadness after this kind of breakup. It's the anger you're trying so hard to hide, even from yourself. The way it flashes up at night when the silence gets too loud, and then you instantly push it back down because you're afraid of what it means about you. You're angry at them, aren't you? Angry they lied, or blurred the lines, or let you build a future in your head while they kept their options open. Angry they chose someone else after you stood beside them through the dark parts of their life. And underneath that, there's the anger at yourself for staying when it hurt, for explaining away the red flags, for giving so much love to someone who never really chose you. The hardest part is, you feel like you're not allowed to feel any of this. Maybe you were taught that anger makes you unlovable. That good people stay calm, stay understanding, stay grateful for any crumbs they're given. So you learn to swallow every sharp feeling and turn it inward instead. Not because you're dramatic, but because it feels safer to believe you're the problem than to admit they were careless with your heart. You start calling it overthinking, or say you're just tired, when really it's anger that has nowhere to go. That buried anger doesn't disappear. It just changes costume. Sometimes it becomes depression, where everything feels heavy and wrong, and you can't remember what hope used to feel like. Sometimes it becomes numbness, where you stare at your phone and feel nothing at all, and you wonder if you've finally broken. Sometimes it becomes quiet self-hatred, the voice that whispers, "Of course they chose someone else. Who would ever stay?" But there's nothing wrong with the part of you that wants to shout, "I deserved better than this." That doesn't make you bitter or dramatic or cruel. It just means a protective part of you is waking up. There is destructive anger, the kind that wants to burn everything down, attack them, attack yourself, prove how hurt you are. And there is protective anger, the kind that stands between you and more harm, that says, no more begging to be chosen, no more shrinking to fit. Can you feel the difference? It's not just about venting. It's about giving your anger a safe container so it doesn't quietly poison you. You can write them a letter you never send, saying everything you swallowed. You can sit alone in your room and actually say the words out loud. I'm angry, you used me. I'm angry, I let you. You can punch a pillow, scream into the car. Let your body shake until some of that frozen energy moves. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you honest. As long as you haven't gone numb, there is still something in you that knows you are worth more than what you got. In the next part, I want to help you listen to that protective anger so it can turn into boundaries instead of walls, and guide you toward a love that doesn't require you to bleed to be chosen. The loneliness after, when everyone tells you to move on. Anger is loud, but the loneliness after is so quiet that most people never really hear it. They just see you functioning again, going to work, posting something neutral, and they think, good, you're moving on. As if moving on is a switch you flip instead of a life you have to relearn without the person you thought had finally chosen you. So they say the lines everyone says, you'll find someone better. It wasn't meant to be. Just focus on yourself. They mean well, but every time you hear it, a part of you shrinks. You start wondering, am I being dramatic for still hurting? Is there something wrong with me because I can't just let it go? The hardest part is, those sentences sound like comfort, but they land like, hurry up, you're taking too long. What scares me most is how invisible this ache can become. During the day, you nod along, you say, yeah, you're right, and you change the subject. But then night comes. You lie in the same spot where you used to text them goodnight, scrolling through old messages you promised yourself you deleted. You wake up reaching for your phone, half expecting their name on the screen, even though you know it will be silent. No one sees that moment when the silence feels heavier than your body. Being alone doesn't hurt most. Being replaced does. Knowing they could suddenly give to someone else what they kept hesitating to give you. And when people tell you, just focus on yourself, it's not just about going to the gym or picking up a hobby. It's about rebuilding an entire identity that was wrapped around a future you were secretly living in every day. That doesn't happen in a week. That doesn't make you weak. It just means you love deeply enough that your nervous system is still catching up to reality. Healing from being replaced is not linear or quick, especially when you built your worth around being the one who stayed, the one who gave everything. Some mornings you feel almost okay, and then a random song, a street, a photo pulls you under again. You start thinking, I must be going backwards. But grief isn't a straight line. It loops, it repeats. It revisits the same rooms until they don't hurt as much to stand in. When other people don't get it, you're allowed to be the one who understands yourself. You can quietly say, my pace is allowed. My hurt makes sense. There's nothing wrong with me for still missing what I lost. Feeling lonely right now doesn't mean I'll always be alone. Their choice doesn't decide my value. As long as you haven't abandoned yourself, you're not actually alone in this, even if it feels like it at night. In the next part, I want to sit with that loneliness and show you how to turn it into a kind of honest companionship with yourself. So you're not just waiting to be chosen, you're learning how to stay with you, even here. What scares me most, letting go without knowing what comes next. So when I say, stay with you, I know that's where your chest tightens. Because if you really stop holding on to them, if you let the picture of them in your mind go dim, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like stepping off a cliff in the dark. No hand to catch you. No guarantee you'll ever be loved like that again. That's what scares me most about letting go. It's not just about losing a person. It's losing the story that kept you company at night. The quiet belief that maybe they'd wake up, realize you were the one, and come back choosing you properly this time. As long as you haven't closed that door in your head, you can pretend you're not really alone. You can tell yourself this isn't the end, just a pause. The hardest part is, your brain would rather cling to that painful maybe than face a blank I don't know. Obsessing over their last message, replaying the night they pulled away, checking who they're with now. It hurts, but at least it's familiar hurt, predictable. Your mind knows the pattern. Remember, ache, hope, crash, repeat. An unknown future feels more threatening than a known heartbreak. There's nothing wrong with you for doing this. Our brains are wired to choose what they can predict over what they can't. Studies even show rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain. So of course you keep touching the same bruise instead of walking into a room where you can't see anything yet. At least this pain has a name. Them. So you keep a mental door open. You still check their status. You still picture them knocking one night, saying, I was wrong. You edit their new partner in your mind into something temporary, a phase they'll grow out of. That doesn't make you pathetic or stuck. It just means you're trying to delay the moment you have to stand in the pure silence of, they chose someone else and I don't know what comes after. But what if that silence isn't only emptiness? What if the blank space after them is not just absence, but also room? Room where you don't have to perform to be chosen. Room where parts of you they never really saw can finally breathe. Room for a kind of love that doesn't require you to beg the same door to open. Right now, that space looks like nothing. Just lonely nights and questions with no answers. Yet every life you admire started from some kind of blank. In the next part, I want to show you how to slowly stop staring at the door behind you and turn toward that open, unshaped space in front of you. Not as punishment, but as the beginning of a different kind of home with yourself. You were not too much. Understanding your needs as legitimate, not a burden. So when you finally turn away from that closed door, something else creeps in with the silence. That sentence you've heard from them or from others or from your own mind at night. Maybe I was just too much. Too needy, too sensitive, too intense. You replay every moment you reached for them and wonder, did I smother this? Did my love push them away? The hardest part is how believable that sounds when you've been left and they've already chosen someone else. It's so easy to make their decision a verdict on your character. They seem calmer now, less pressured, more relaxed. So you tell yourself, maybe if I'd needed less, they would have stayed. Maybe if I'd been more chill, they would have chosen me. You start rewriting the whole story around that one accusation. But wanting consistency is not being too much. Wanting your messages answered, your plans kept, your promises honored, that doesn't make you demanding. It just means you were trying to feel safe. Wanting reassurance is not weakness. When someone pulls away, goes quiet for days, then comes back like nothing happened, of course you feel anxious. Of course you ask, are we okay? That is not drama. That is your nervous system begging for honesty. It's not just about romance, it's about basic human attachment. Research calls it secure attachment, but you don't need the term to know this. It is normal to want honesty, effort, and emotional presence from the person you love. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know where you stand. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen in the daylight, not only in the lonely hours of the night when they are bored, or hurt, or in need of comfort. Maybe your needs were too much for their current capacity. That part might be true. Maybe they were overwhelmed by depth, by accountability, by being really seen. Maybe they only knew how to give half love, and your full heart made that impossible to hide. But that is about their limits, not about your wrongness. It doesn't mean you loved wrong. It means you loved someone who could not meet you. What scares me most is how quickly you start shrinking yourself after that. You start promising, next time I won't care this loudly. Next time I'll need less. As long as you haven't gone numb, a part of you still hopes, and that part begins to bargain. If I can just be smaller, quieter, easier, maybe I won't be left again. Instead, I want you to try something simple. Take a page and write down your core needs in love. I need consistency. I need honesty. I need affection. I need to feel wanted. I need to feel safe bringing up what hurts. And next to each one, write, this is a human need, not a flaw. Read it back to yourself when the old story returns. Let it be the first small act of self-respect that prepares you for the kind of love that will not call your fullness a burden. Because in the next part, we're going to talk about what it actually looks like to protect those needs without turning your heart to stone. When I gave them everything becomes your whole identity. So you put the pen down after that list of needs, and for a second, the room goes quiet. The night feels heavier than usual. You look around at the life you have left and realize you don't fully know who you are without the person you built everything around. When did I gave them everything become the only sentence you know how to say about yourself? Because usually, I gave them everything doesn't happen all at once. It happens in tiny trades. You cancel a plan with friends here. You let a boundary slide there. You stop bringing up the music you love because they roll their eyes. You start answering their messages the second they appear. Even when you are exhausted, even when it feels wrong. One day, you wake up and your hobbies are memories. Your opinions are softer. Your world is smaller. And they are at the center of it. The hardest part is when your whole identity fuses with being the giver. Their leaving does not feel like the end of a relationship. It feels like the end of you. It's not just about losing the person, it is losing the role that made you feel worthy. If your worth was wrapped in how much you could offer, then their rejection sounds like you, in your entirety, were not chosen. No wonder your chest hurts like a bruise that will not fade. There's nothing wrong with being generous. There's nothing wrong with wanting to love deeply. That doesn't make you weak or foolish. It just means you were trying to feel safe the way you learned safety works. Maybe growing up, love felt conditional, earned by being useful, quiet, pleasing. Maybe you were the child who kept the peace, who read every mood in the room so no one would explode. Of course you overgive now. You were trained to. What scares me most is how easy it is to confuse overgiving with love. Especially when you are afraid of being alone, you start believing that if you just do more, they will finally stay. Anxious hearts cling harder to people who are distant, hoping effort can close the gap. Research even shows we overestimate how much those people are actually giving back. You are not imagining the hurt, but you might be imagining the balance. So where does that leave you now in this silence after they have chosen someone else? As long as you haven't gone completely numb, there is still hope. Because you are more than what you gave them. You existed before this role. Reclaiming your identity is not selfish. It is the first step toward ever feeling safe in love again. In the next part, we're going to talk about how to find those lost pieces of yourself, one by one. But for tonight, sit with this question. Who were you before you started giving yourself away? The hidden contract you didn't know you signed. Who were you before you started giving yourself away? Before every room you walked into turned into a silent negotiation you didn't know you were making. Before love became a job description you never actually applied for, but still tried to perform perfectly, because the thought of being alone again at night scared you more than exhaustion ever could. Somewhere along the way, you signed a contract you never saw on paper. It sounded like this: I will meet all your needs. I will study your moods like weather. so I can shield you from every storm. I will swallow my hurt, quiet my needs, and rearrange my whole life around you. And in return, you will stay. You will choose me. You thought the deal was fair because what scares me most is how normal that felt. You thought the deal was, if I give you everything, you won't leave. If I am patient with your confusion, your distance, your mixed signals, eventually you will wake up and see I am the one. You thought the deal was, if I make myself impossible to replace, you will never try. The hardest part is realizing they never actually agreed to any of that. Not out loud, not in their mind, not in the way you did, alone in the silence of your own hope. So when they chose someone else, it didn't just hurt because you lost them. It hurt because in your body, it felt like they broke a promise. But they were living by a different rule book. To them, you were kind, steady, safe. But there was no moment where they said, I understand you are sacrificing yourself for me, and I accept this as a lifelong bond. That promise existed mostly inside you. That doesn't make you foolish. It just means you were loving from a script you learned a long time ago. For many of us, that script started in childhood. Maybe love came when you were useful, when you were quiet, helpful, the one who didn't cause trouble. Maybe you became the caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who could feel every shift in the room before anyone raised their voice. You start believing love is something you earn by anticipating other people's needs and disappearing your own. It's not just about romance, it's about survival patterns dressed up as devotion. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen. There's nothing wrong with hoping your love will be enough. But as long as you haven't seen this hidden contract clearly, you'll keep signing it with new people, wondering why you end up lonely while they move on. So what if the new agreement isn't with them at all? What if the new contract sounds like, I will not abandon myself to keep someone else, even if that means they might leave? You thought the deal was, I lose me, so I don't lose you. In the next part, we're going to ask a harder question. What would love look like if the deal finally changed? Why giving more doesn't fix someone who can't receive? So, if the new deal is, I will not abandon myself to keep someone else, then we have to talk about the people who were never really there to be kept. The ones you gave everything to, who still chose someone else. The hardest part is how easy it is to turn that into proof that you were the problem. When I say emotionally unavailable, I do not mean evil. I mean someone who lives on the surface. They can text all night but avoid real questions. They can be affectionate one day and distant the next. Hot one week, cold the next month. They joke when things get serious, change the subject when you ask what they feel, shut down or disappear when intimacy gets close. It's not just about commitment on paper. It's about how they flinch from depth, how they seem allergic to being fully seen. With someone like that, your love lands differently. What feels like comfort to you can feel like pressure to them. The more you reach out, the more they feel crowded. The more you reassure, the more they feel responsible for your heart. You think, if I just love better, they'll relax and stay. They think, I can't breathe. So they step back, and you feel that step like a cold night hitting your chest. You start doing what tender people always do. You give more. You write longer messages. You explain yourself. You forgive faster. You lower your needs, then pretend you do not have any. You overfunction so they can underfunction. There's nothing wrong with wanting to save something that matters to you. But what scares me most is how quietly this pattern teaches you that love only works if you work twice as hard. Every time they pull away, you take it as a signal to perform. Every time they come back, you take it as proof your extra effort worked. You don't notice that their inconsistency is setting the rhythm, and you're just dancing around their fear. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen by someone you poured yourself into does. Here's the part that feels unfair. When someone cannot receive love, there is no amount of giving that will fix that. You are trying to pour a whole ocean into a cracked cup. It keeps leaking, not because the water is wrong, but because the container was never built to hold that much. That doesn't make you too much. It just means they were not equipped. So what if the breakup is not proof that your love failed, but evidence that you were offering a depth they could not stand in without drowning? What if them choosing someone else says more about their capacity than your worth? In the next part, I want to talk about why hearts like yours keep finding cups like that in the first place, and how attachment quietly pulls you toward what keeps hurting you. Attachment styles. Why you chased the one who couldn't stay. Attachment is one of those quiet forces you don't see, but you feel in your chest at night. It's the invisible script that decides whose messages light you up, whose silence you wait in, whose crumbs you call love because the hunger is so old. The hardest part is, you think you're just choosing them, but something in you was chosen long before. People talk about attachment styles like diagnoses, but I don't want to do that to you. Think of them more like habits your heart learned to survive. There's secure, where love feels mostly calm and mutual. There's anxious, where you feel like you're always one step away from being left. There's avoidant, where closeness feels suffocating, and you keep an escape hatch in every relationship. And there's disorganized, where love and fear got so tangled that intimacy feels like wanting to run and cling at the same time. If you felt safe and seen growing up, you probably lean more secure. You can miss someone and still feel basically worthy. But if love came with conditions, if attention was inconsistent, if the people you needed were sometimes warm and sometimes distant, your nervous system learned a different rhythm. You start bracing for the drop even during the good moments. You start working for what should have been given. That's what anxious attachment often feels like. You feel too much, too fast. Their delayed text makes your stomach drop. Their mood shift keeps you up at night, replaying every word. It's not just about wanting love, it's about needing reassurance that you're not about to be abandoned again. What scares me most is how easy it is to call that anxiety chemistry. Avoidant partners, on the other hand, pull you in and push you away. They open up just enough to hook you, then disappear when things get too real. To them, closeness feels like danger. To you, their distance feels like proof you're failing. Anxious and avoidant attachment fit together like a lock and key, not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar. Your body recognizes the chaos. Disorganized attachment is even more confusing. Maybe you grew up with emotional chaos, or with people who are both a source of comfort and of hurt. So now, when someone is inconsistent, you feel an almost magnetic pull. You confuse the intensity of the roller coaster with depth. You tell yourself, if I can just love them right, it will finally stop hurting. But there's nothing wrong with you for being wired this way. That doesn't make you needy, broken, or doomed. It just means your system learned to survive in rooms where you had to earn every bit of warmth. Attachment styles are not life sentences. They're patterns, and patterns can soften. They can shift as you meet safer people, and as you become a safer person to yourself. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can still learn a different kind of love. One that doesn't spike your anxiety to feel alive. One that doesn't disappear the moment you relax. Before we talk about how to build that, can you gently notice which description feels most like you, without calling yourself wrong? And if you trace that feeling back, what was your younger self trying to survive when they first learned to love like this? When their leaving feels like proof, you're too much. If you trace that feeling back, it probably lands on one fear that keeps you up at night. What if they left because of you? Not because it was wrong for them, not because they were never really able to love, but because your needs, your emotions, your intensity pushed them away and into someone else's arms. The hardest part is how believable that story feels. You replay every moment you asked for reassurance. Every time you said, "Can you just tell me you're not going anywhere?" Every time you needed one more text before bed, because the silence made you feel so alone. You start thinking, maybe if I had needed less, they would have stayed. Maybe if I had been cooler, quieter, less dramatic, I would have been the one they'd chosen. What scares me most is how quickly you turn their limits into your shame. Because here's the thing no one told you. Some people, especially the avoidant, the emotionally unavailable, feel overwhelmed by completely normal needs for closeness. Not clinginess, not chaos. Just simple, human, can I trust you? Will you show up? And instead of saying, I can't do that, they pull away, they go cold, or they find someone whose numbness matches their own. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being told, directly or indirectly, that your need for consistency is too much does. It's not just about losing love, it's about starting to believe that wanting to be held, wanting to be chosen clearly, wanting effort without begging, is somehow wrong. There's nothing wrong with you for wanting those things. That doesn't make you demanding. It just means your nervous system was asking for safety, and theirs didn't know how to give it. We need to name something gently. There is a difference between having needs and overfunctioning. Overfunctioning is when you start doing all the work of the relationship, managing their moods, excusing their distance, fixing everything so they never have to show up. Having needs is saying, I want to feel considered. I want you to call when you say you will. I want to know I matter. Those are not too much. Those are the basics of love. So when your mind whispers, you were too much, try answering back. You were not too much. You were just too honest for their avoidance. You were not too much. Your clarity was too bright for their confusion. You were not too much. Your longing was simply too real for someone who only knew how to stay half in. Your needs were too much for the wrong nervous system, not too much for love itself. The right person will not feel smothered by your desire for reassurance. They will feel grateful you speak your heart. As long as you haven't shut those needs down completely, there is still hope to learn how to honor them without apologizing. In the next part, I want to show you what it looks like to keep needing what you need, while no longer begging anyone to meet it. The fantasy of if I were better, they would have stayed. You keep needing what you need, and then your mind whispers, if I needed less, they would have stayed. That's where the loop begins, doesn't it? Lying awake at night, replaying the same scenes but with different versions of you. A prettier you, a calmer you, a more successful, less emotional, less difficult you. Versions that, in your head, they would have proudly chosen. You start editing yourself in hindsight. In this memory, you do not cry when they pull away. You smile and act unbothered. In that one, you are busier, more mysterious, not so available. In another, you have the body you think they wanted, the money, the confidence, the perfect timing. The hardest part is, these fantasies feel logical. If pain had a clear cause, then you could fix it, right? If you were better, they would have stayed. If you were enough, they wouldn't have picked someone else. But it's not just about being better. It's about trying to bargain with what already happened, so you do not have to feel this powerless. What scares me most is how quickly self-improvement turns into self-blame. You start reading every book, going to the gym, working on your attachment style, but underneath the growth, there is a quiet contract. If I heal enough, love will finally stop leaving. That is not healing. That is you trying to control what was never yours to control. Their capacity for commitment was always theirs. Their honesty, or lack of it, lived in them long before you. Their emotional availability, their readiness, their courage to stay when it got real. That doesn't belong to you. You could have been the most radiant, regulated, glowing version of yourself, and they still could have chosen distance or silence or someone else. That doesn't make you unworthy. It just means their limits were stronger than your love. Imagine this. One night you meet a future version of you, the one who did all the work. Therapy, boundaries, career, body, friendships. They sit across from you, steady and kind, and you ask the question you were terrified of. If I had been you back then, would they have stayed? And this wiser, you looks at you with so much softness and says, no, they still would have left. because it was never about your worth. It was about their walls. There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. There is something beautiful in deciding you will not stay stuck in the patterns that hurt you. But growth built on fear of being alone will always feel like walking on eggshells with yourself. Growth built on love sounds different. It says, I want to feel solid, loved, and at home in myself, whether anyone chooses me or not. Being unchosen so far does not mean you must fix yourself so no one ever leaves again. As long as you haven't given up on your own heart, there is another way to grow. In the next part, I want to show you what it looks like to build that kind of growth. Not to keep someone, but to finally keep yourself. Grieving the fantasy future. You built with them. Keeping yourself starts with telling the truth about what you actually lost. Because it wasn't just them, was it? It was the apartment you already saw in your mind, the way you'd argue over which side of the bed you'd sleep on, the plants on the windowsill, the mugs left in the sink after long, sleepy nights. It was the holidays you thought you'd spend together, switching between their family and yours, finally not being the lonely one at the table. It was the children you maybe never said out loud, but secretly named in the silence. The dog you imagined walking at night, their hand brushing yours in the cold. The way you pictured growing old, sharing the same couch, the same shows, the same soft routines. Or even simpler than that, it was just being their person, the one they called first, the one they finally chose and kept choosing. The hardest part is that future felt real to your body. Your nervous system didn't file it under fantasy, it filed it under home. So when they chose someone else, it wasn't just a breakup. It was an eviction from a life that never technically existed, but lived in every plan you made, every small decision you bent around them. No wonder it hurts this much. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen by the future you were building does. Research says we often overestimate how much someone actually reciprocated, but that doesn't make you foolish, and it doesn't make your grief wrong. It just means your hope was working overtime, trying to turn almost love into something solid enough to stand on. What scares me most is how easy it is to dismiss this pain. To tell yourself, it was all in my head, so I shouldn't feel this bad. But your body doesn't grieve in technical terms. It grieves what it rehearsed. Every time you pictured next year with them, your heart took a step into that year. Now you have to walk all those steps back. You start unbuilding a life no one else even knew you were living. You thought you'd wake up next to them. You thought you'd spend Sunday mornings in shared pajamas and shared silence. You thought you'd finally stop wondering who will hold you when you're old. You thought this was the story where you were finally chosen. There's nothing wrong with you for mourning scenes that only ever played in your imagination. Grieving that future is part of grieving yourself, the version of you who believed this was it. Instead of telling that part to shut up and move on, what if you sat with each lost piece and named it? The trip you'll never take, the key you'll never copy, the family you won't build together. Each one deserves a small goodbye. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, this grief can become a doorway. Because once you see how much of your hurt lives in the future you gave away, you can start asking a quieter question. What kind of future could you build that doesn't depend on someone else staying? Seeing them with someone else. The shock of being replaced. And then, just when you're starting to imagine that quieter future, it happens. A photo, a post, a message. You open your phone on a random afternoon, or you're out getting groceries, half asleep inside your own life. And there they are. Their hand on someone else's back. Their face tilted toward a new person in that soft way you thought was yours. Your stomach drops before your mind can catch up. Your chest goes hot and hollow at the same time. It feels like the air gets sucked out of the room, even if you're standing in the middle of a crowded street. Your body knows before your brain has words. Your hands shake. Your vision narrows. Maybe your ears ring a little. Studies say rejection lights up the same part of your brain as physical pain, but you do not need research to tell you that. You feel it. It's not just about seeing them happy. It's the shock of seeing yourself gone, replaced, like someone quietly swapped you out of your own life while you were sleeping. The hardest part is how quickly it turns into a story about your worth. You start thinking, so I was that easy to walk away from? That forgettable? It can feel like being erased, like all the nights, all the love, all the small ways you showed up were just a draft they edited out. What scares me most about moments like this is how primitive they are. Your nervous system doesn't see a curated picture. It sees exile. It sees being left outside the village, alone in the dark, and it panics. And then your mind joins in. You start comparing without even wanting to. You zoom in on their face, their clothes, their body, their smile. Are they prettier, cooler, easier? You start rewriting history to make it make sense. Maybe they were never that into you. Maybe you were always too much or not enough. Their new relationship becomes instantly perfect in your head, while yours turns into a mistake, a prequel, a practice run they had to get through to reach the real thing. But that doesn't make you disposable. It just means your brain is trying to protect you by finding a reason, even if it hurts. This is a trauma response, not the truth. Your mind is scanning for what was wrong with you, because if it can find the flaw, maybe it can stop this from ever happening again. There's nothing wrong with wanting that kind of safety. Wanting it doesn't mean their new person is better, or that your love was meaningless. It means this cut went deep. As long as you haven't gone numb, your reaction is proof you cared. You are not seeing the full story. You are seeing a carefully framed snapshot through the lens of your own hurt. What if that picture isn't evidence that love skipped you, but an invitation to ask a different question? What are you not seeing when you only look at what they chose next? The comparison spiral. When their new person becomes your mirror. So you do what almost all of us do. You turn toward the only evidence you have. The person they chose next. You zoom in on photos, reread captions, watch stories in the middle of the night when the silence feels loud, and your chest feels wrong. You are not just scrolling, you are studying. You are trying to solve the question that keeps you awake. What do they have that I don't? You start cataloging everything. Their face, their body, their clothes, how they laugh in pictures, how many friends they seem to have, the trips they go on. You read between every line of every post. Are they more fun, more calm, less intense? Do they look like the kind of person who doesn't get as hurt as you do? It's not just about curiosity. It's a quiet investigation into your own worth. The hardest part is your brain doesn't look at them neutrally. It turns them into a mirror. Every old insecurity you've ever carried suddenly shows up in their reflection. If you've always felt too quiet, you notice how outgoing they seem. If you've always felt too emotional, you notice how carefree they look. You think it means the universe is confirming your worst fears. You think it means you were right, you are not enough. But what scares me most is how convincing that story feels when you're lonely. Rejection already activates the parts of your brain that process physical pain. So of course, any difference between you and this new person feels like proof. You think it means they won the competition you did not know you were in. You think it means love chose them and skipped you on purpose. What if their choice isn't a ranking, but a reflection of where they are, not who you are? People move on for 1,000 reasons that have nothing to do with better or worse. Sometimes they choose familiar attachment, not healthy love. Sometimes they choose someone easier, someone who doesn't ask them to grow. Sometimes they choose fast intensity over slow safety. That doesn't make you the wrong one. It just means you weren't the match for the story they were willing to live. So when you catch yourself spiraling, you start asking different questions. What am I guessing right now? What do I actually know? Have I ever seen them fight, cry, feel lonely at night? Or am I comparing my raw, unfiltered pain to their highlight reel? You think it means their happiness is permanent and your hurt is proof you lost. but you're only seeing a snapshot, not the whole film. Then you go one layer deeper. What does this obsession say about my wounds, not my worth? Why does this particular person trigger this particular fear? As long as you haven't gone numb, the sting is pointing to an old story that wants to be healed. You think it means you have to become more like them to be chosen. What if it's actually an invitation to see who you already are, outside of this triangle, outside of their choice, outside of the mirror altogether, separating your worth from their choice? So let's do that. Let's step outside the triangle for a second, outside the night you found out they had chosen someone else, and ask a quieter question. What if their choice and your worth are two different stories that just happen to collide? What if you've been reading one as proof of the other for so long that they feel the same in your body? Worth is the part of you that was there before your first crush, before your first rejection, before anyone ever said yes or no to you. Compatibility is different. It's timing and wounds and readiness. It's not just about how deeply you can love, but whether both people are actually able to receive that love without running, numbing, or needing to be rescued. You can be deeply worthy and still not be the right fit for someone at the stage of healing they're in. Think about it. Two equally worthy people can still hurt each other. The anxious person who overgives and clings to the distant partner is not less valuable than the one who leaves. The distant one is not more special because they were chosen next. They're just playing out their own fears. Sometimes people pick what feels familiar over what feels safe. Sometimes they choose what confirms their old story over what could have rewritten it. The hardest part is how personal it feels. Their decision lands in your chest like a verdict. You lost. They won. You were not enough. But someone's inability to love you well usually says more about their emotional capacity than your lovability. If they can only tolerate a certain level of intimacy, they will pick the person who matches that level, even if you were the one who stayed up with them at night, even if you were the one who carried their secrets through the silence. That doesn't make you replaceable, it just means they were choosing their comfort, their familiar pain, their version of manageable. You start realizing it was never a competition between you and this other person. It was a conflict between their longing for love and their fear of it. They solved that conflict the only way they knew how. It was clumsy, it was cruel, but it was about them. So when your brain tries to glue their choice to your worth, I want you to have a script. Something simple you can repeat when the hurt gets loud. Their choice is about their capacity. My worth is about my existence. Their choice can change. My worth cannot. Their choice can be wrong for me. My worth is not up for debate. Say it slowly, even if you do not believe it yet. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can practice this. For one day, just one, try living as if that mantra is true. Notice what shifts. Notice how you feel in your own presence when their decision is no longer allowed to define you. We'll talk about how to grieve what you lost next. But for now, what if you let your worth be the one thing they never got to touch? When you start blaming yourself for ignoring the red flags, when you start living like your worth is off limits, something else usually breaks open. The memories, the patterns, the nights you lie awake replaying every moment you ignored your own discomfort and called it love instead. You start asking, not just, why didn't they choose me? But, why did I keep choosing them, even when it hurt? Because if you're honest, there were red flags, little ones at first. The inconsistency you explained away as stress, the broken promises that turned into maybe next week, the secrecy about their phone, their past, their plans. The emotional shutdowns where they went cold and distant and you ended up apologizing for even wanting to talk. The subtle disrespect, the jokes that left you feeling small. The way your needs were always too much, while their comfort was sacred. The hardest part is looking back and seeing it so clearly now. You remember the night they disappeared after saying they'd call. The way your chest felt wrong, how your body knew something you didn't want to admit. And then you remember how you overrode yourself, how you sent the soft message, gave the benefit of the doubt, tried to be understanding so you would not be alone. Now you feel angry, embarrassed. How did you not see it? How did you still give them everything? I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you for missing it. It's not just about logic. Hope is powerful. Attachment is powerful. Your brain is wired with love hormones that light up when you feel chosen, even a little. Research shows rejection activates the same parts of the brain as physical pain. Of course, denial felt safer than touching that wound. When you are deeply invested, admitting the truth feels like ripping your own future away. What scares me most is how easily we blame our softness instead of our starvation. You weren't foolish for wanting love. You were lonely, and your nervous system had learned that inconsistent love is still better than no love at all. If you grew up around unpredictability, your body might even confuse anxiety with chemistry, silence with mystery, distance with depth. That doesn't make you broken. It just means your survival strategies were still running the show. Then versus now, the same behavior tells a different story. Then, their late replies meant they were busy. Now, they mean you were not a priority. Then, their secrecy felt like privacy. Now, it feels like hiding. Then, your overgiving felt like proof of your love. Now it feels like abandoning yourself. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can use this. Missed red flags are still information, just delivered late. They show you exactly where you once betrayed yourself so you can draw a line there next time. You start asking different questions. If present me learns to listen to my discomfort, how might future me thank me? What kind of love might finally feel calm enough to stay? The hardest part, accepting they chose someone else and still choosing yourself. And this is where it gets real. Not in the moment you spot the red flag, but in the moment you finally admit, I saw it and I stayed. I gave everything I knew how to give, and they still turned around and built a future with someone else. The hardest part is realizing there is no sentence you can say, no version of yourself you can perform now, that will travel backward in time and make them choose differently. You replay it anyway. Do you notice that? The nights where you scroll too far back in your messages, searching for the exact line where it went wrong. The day they went quiet. The joke you did not laugh at the right way. You keep thinking, if I can just find the mistake, I can fix it. But you cannot rewrite a story that has already ended. You cannot reach into their new life and rearrange their heart so it finally sees your value the way you begged it to. So you cling to the one fantasy that still feels alive. One day they will realize. One day they will wake up next to this new person, stare at the ceiling, and finally understand what they lost. Does that thought visit you at night when the silence gets loud? It feels like comfort, but it keeps you frozen. As long as you haven't let go of, they'll realize one day you are still waiting for them to hand you your worth back. They chose someone else, and you are still standing in the doorway of a house you no longer live in, hoping the door will swing open again. They chose someone else, and you keep auditioning in your head, rewriting scenes where you're finally picked. It's not just about missing their love. It is about waiting for the verdict that proves you were never the problem. But what if that verdict is never coming? Research says rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain, which is why this hurts like being cut open. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means your body believes it has been abandoned, and in a way, it has. They stepped away from you. The danger now is that you follow them by stepping away from yourself. Choosing yourself is how you stop that. Not as a performance, not as a loud declaration online, as a quiet daily practice. You start with very small things, getting out of bed when it feels pointless, drinking water, going to therapy even when you feel too broken, not answering when they text at midnight just to see if you are still there. There's nothing wrong with still hoping they will apologize. What scares me most is when that hope makes you abandon your own boundaries. They chose someone else, and you can still choose to treat your time like it matters. They chose someone else, and you can still decide their silence is an answer. Choosing yourself is not pretending you are over it. It is sitting in the ache and saying, I will not leave me the way they did. I will not call. I will not beg. I will not shrink to fit. From here, choosing yourself can start to look like something very specific, very ordinary, and quietly life-changing. Rebuilding trust in your own judgment. Very ordinary and quietly life-changing. Because after someone chooses someone else, the hardest part is not just missing them. It's looking at yourself and thinking, if I was that wrong about them, what else am I wrong about? You start replaying every moment, every green light you thought you saw. Was it all in your head? Were you foolish the whole time? What scares me most, and maybe you too, is this thought that if your intuition failed you once, you can never trust it again. So you don't just lose them. You lose confidence in your own eyes, your own heart, your own sense of what love feels like. But being wrong about a person doesn't mean you are wrong as a person. There's nothing wrong with being hopeful. There's nothing wrong with believing someone when they say they care, or reading daily texts and late-night calls as signs of real connection. Research even shows we tend to overestimate how much the other person reciprocated. That doesn't make you delusional. It just means you are human, and you wanted to believe the best. It's not just about, I should have known better. They might have been hiding things. They might have been confused or emotionally unavailable, or saying one thing while their actions quietly prepared an exit. Being deceived or overly hopeful is not the same as being fundamentally broken. Being trusting is not a flaw. It is a strength that needs protection, not a weakness that needs to disappear. So how do you rebuild trust in yourself when you feel this wrong and this hurt? You start very small. The next time your stomach tightens when someone's words and actions do not match, you do not rush past it. You pause. You put a hand on your chest or your belly and actually ask, what do I feel right now? Your body often knew before your mind could admit it. That quiet discomfort you ignored last time. This time, you let it speak. You slow down. You stop treating every spark like a deadline. You give connections time to show you what they are in the light of day, not just at night in the silence of your own fantasies. And you reality test with safe people. The friend who tells you the truth gently, the therapist, the person who is not dazzled by the same things you are. Does this seem consistent to you? As a way of borrowing perspective while your own trust repairs. As long as you haven't abandoned yourself, you're already safer than you were before. Future love will still be uncertain. There are no guarantees that someone will stay. But when you know you will not ignore yourself again, you do not need guarantees from anyone else. Self-trust becomes your seatbelt. Even if the ride ends, you know you will not throw yourself out of the car to keep them from leaving. If you want, try this tonight. Remember one time you did listen to yourself, however small. Maybe you walked away from a conversation that felt wrong. Maybe you said no when you are usually the one who always said yes. Let yourself feel that moment again in your body. That is proof you are not lost to yourself. From there, this growing self-trust will start to change the way you love next time, and the kind of love you're even willing to stay for. Learning to receive, turning your giving heart inward, that small moment of self-trust is where something else becomes possible. Instead of giving everything away, you start wondering what it would be like to let something come toward you. Not because you stopped being generous, but because you're finally tired of bleeding for people who only ever offered you crumbs. What if this time you let it come to you? You know how easy it is for you to give. You remember the late night drives, the long messages, the way you stayed up at night talking them down from their storms, even when you were falling apart yourself. That part never felt hard. The hardest part is how strange it feels when someone turns to you and says, "What about you? What do you need?" Your chest tightens. You change the subject. You pretend you are fine. Why does being cared for feel more dangerous than being exhausted? It's not just about habits. It's about the quiet beliefs sitting underneath. I don't want to be a burden. I have to earn love. If I need too much, they'll leave. These sentences live in your body like facts. They turn every simple act of receiving into a test you are afraid to fail. So you overgive instead. You try to become so useful, so understanding, so low maintenance that no one will ever have a reason to walk away. But they still did, didn't they? They still chose someone else. What scares me most when I look at my own patterns is realizing how often I confuse self-abandonment with love. I thought if I carried all the weight, they would finally see my worth. But love that only exists as long as you are overperforming is not love. It's anxiety dressed up as devotion. There's nothing wrong with wanting to show up deeply for someone. That doesn't make you weak or wrong. It just means you were never taught how to let someone show up for you too. So we practice. Gently. You start with things that feel almost too small to matter. When someone gives you a compliment, you resist the urge to argue with it or throw it away. You pause, breathe, and simply say, "Thank you," even if your face gets hot. When a friend says, "Text me when you get home," you actually text them. When carrying all the grocery bags hurts your hands, you ask, "Can you take one?" These are tiny acts on the surface. Inside, they're training. You are teaching your nervous system that love can move towards you without you earning it first. That you can need and still be chosen. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, there is still a part of you that aches to try this different way. So what if, this time, you let it come to you? What would it feel like one day to be held, cared for, and fully chosen, without having to overgive yourself into the ground just to stay? Will I ever be loved the way I loved them? Maybe that's the question that keeps echoing in the silence after they're gone. Will I ever be loved the way I loved them? Not just liked, not just tolerated, but seen in the same fierce, devoted way I saw them. You gave everything you knew how to give. So if that wasn't enough to be chosen, what could ever be? The hardest part is this quiet terror that settles in your chest at night. The fear that your biggest love is already behind you. That the most intense, alive, all-in version of you was spent on someone who walked away and chose someone else. You start believing there was only one chance to be loved like that, and you already used it up. But can I ask you something gently? When you say, "I love them so deeply," was it only love? Or was it love tangled with anxiety, fear, and that constant feeling that if you stopped overgiving for even a moment, you would lose them? Was it love or was it survival? You were not just loving them, you were trying to keep yourself from being abandoned. Think about how your body felt around them, the racing thoughts when they took too long to reply, the way your stomach dropped when they pulled away, how you suddenly worked twice as hard to pull them back. Research calls this anxious attachment, but you did not need a term to know how much it hurt. It felt like you had to earn every inch of closeness, like love could vanish if you relaxed. So when you ask, "Will I ever be loved the way I love them?" maybe part of what you are really asking is, will I ever feel that intensity again? That burning, obsessive focus. But intensity is not the same as safety. It's not just about how hard you can hold on. Sometimes the fire you miss was actually your nervous system in constant alarm, not your heart at peace. There's another kind of love. Slower, quieter. A love where you do not have to bleed to be kept. Where you are chosen on the days you shine and on the days you are tired and ordinary. Where you can sleep at night without clutching your phone because you trust they will still be there in the morning. That doesn't make it boring. It just means your heart finally gets to rest. In that kind of love, you will not have to give everything to be allowed to stay. You will still be generous, still be soft, but it will be mutual. Your devotion will be met, not drained. And the question will slowly shift from, will I ever be loved the way I love them? 2. Will I let myself be loved in a way that does not hurt? There's nothing wrong with the way you love. Your capacity to love deeply is not a curse. It is a gift that was placed in hands that could not hold it. What scares me most is how easily that can make you turn against your own heart. But as long as you haven't gone fully numb, that capacity is still there, waiting for a safer place to land. So maybe the real future is not another version of them, not another race to prove you are worth staying for, but a different experience of love altogether. A love that feels like exhale instead of emergency. Will you ever be loved the way you love them? I think if you let yourself heal, you will be loved in a way that finally feels right. And the next step is learning how to trust that love without losing yourself again. When they seem happier without you, and it feels like proof you weren't enough, trusting love without losing yourself gets harder when it looks like they already did it with someone else. When you open your phone at night and there they are, smiling in a photo with a new hand on their waist, a new face pressed against their cheek, your chest drops. Your brain whispers or maybe screams, "See? They're happier now. They just needed someone who wasn't you." The hardest part is, it feels like proof. Not just that they moved on, but that you were the problem all along. You start replaying everything you gave, every late night talk, every time you stayed when you were hurt, and it feels like the universe is saying, it still wasn't enough. But what if what you are seeing isn't the full story at all? What if you are comparing your most honest moments to their highlight reel? Social media makes it worse. You are looking at carefully chosen seconds of their new beginning. Frozen smiles and sunsets and captions about finally happy. You are not seeing the arguments, the doubts, the silence after the camera goes off. You are comparing a first stage honeymoon glow to the real, complicated love you lived day after day. That doesn't make you dramatic for hurting. It just means your brain is trying to make sense of something that feels wrong and unfair. So you start comparing yourself to the new person like it is your full-time job. Their looks, their body, their job, their friends, their style. You imagine what they must be doing better than you. How they must be easier, lighter, less needy, more fun. But these comparisons are rigged from the start, aren't they? You only see what confirms the story that you lost. You ignore everything that would remind you that there's nothing wrong with the way you love, only with the way you were met. What scares me most is how quickly we turn their apparent happiness into a verdict on our worth. As if their timing, their coping, their patterns are a scorecard. Some people rush into something new because they cannot sit alone in the silence. Some repeat the same unhealthy dance with different faces. Their smile in a photo says more about their avoidance than about the quality of what you gave. And even if their new relationship looks calm from the outside, can you really know if it is deeper, safer, more real than what you shared? You remember the first months with them, how bright it felt before the cracks showed. It's not just about who looks happy first. It's about who is actually healing. So when you see something that stabs you, try this. Pause. Name the story your brain is telling. They're happier because I wasn't enough. Then gently name 3 other possibilities that don't attack you. They're in the honeymoon phase. They're distracting themselves from their own hurt. We just weren't compatible, no matter how much I gave. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can still choose which story to feed. You are not losing a race because they look okay before you do. Healing is not a competition. Love is not a contest for who posts the happiest photo first. You are allowed to take longer. You are allowed to still feel lonely at night and still be on your way to something better. But if it hurts this much to look, why do you keep opening their page, replaying their new love like a movie you paid for? Why do you keep reopening a wound you say you want to heal? Maybe the next step is understanding why you keep watching a story you are no longer in, and how to finally put the screen down. The obsession loop. Why you can't stop comparing yourself to the new person. You close the app, swear you're done, and then 5 minutes later your fingers open it again before you even notice. Their profile, the new person's profile. Back to theirs, back to the new one. You zoom in on smiles, on hands touching, on comments you read 3 times. And with every scroll, you feel yourself getting smaller. It's not just about curiosity, it's a loop. You start with a question. Why them and not me? Then you hunt for clues. Are they prettier, cooler, more social, less lonely, more whatever? You think you're not? You compare bodies, jobs, friends, the way they dress, the way they write captions. And by the end of the night, you're not just hurt. You're convinced you've been measured and found lacking. The hardest part is how logical it feels in the moment. Your brain is wired to seek certainty and closure, especially after rejection. Studies even show rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain. So of course your mind wants an explanation. If you can just figure out what the new person has that you don't, maybe you can stop feeling so wrong. Maybe you can fix yourself. Maybe love won't leave you again. But what scares me most is how quietly confirmation bias creeps in. You already carry a painful story about yourself. I'm not enough. I'm forgettable. I'm always the one left. So when you look at this new person, you're not seeing them clearly. You're searching for proof. You highlight every trait that seems better, and you ignore every way you were loving, steady, loyal. You're not gathering facts. You're building a case against your own heart. Underneath all the comparing, it's not really, they're better than me, is it? It's, if they're better, then I'm unlovable, replaceable, easy to leave behind. That's the wound. Being alone doesn't hurt most. Being replaced does. Being chosen for a while and then swapped out hits the deepest fear that you were never special, that the love you gave was ordinary, that anyone could have done what you did. There's nothing wrong with you for spiraling like this. That doesn't make you pathetic or obsessed. It just means your nervous system is in a kind of quiet panic, trying to protect you. When something hurts this much, your body goes into a trauma response. Replay, overanalyze, dissect. If you can understand every detail of what went wrong, maybe you can prevent it next time. As long as you haven't made sense of it, your mind refuses to rest. So instead of shaming yourself for checking, start smaller. You don't have to go cold turkey. You can put a tiny boundary between the urge and the action. When you feel your hand reaching for your phone, delay it by 10 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. Breathe. Then maybe next week, make it 30 minutes. Then an hour. You're not banning yourself. You're learning you can survive the itch without scratching it immediately. And when the urge to compare feels unbearable, try a different ritual. Take out a notebook and write down what you're convinced the new person has that you don't. They're more fun, less needy, more attractive, easier. Then, one by one, ask, is this a fact or a projection? How do I know this is true? Where did I first learn that being like me is wrong? You might notice something strange. The more honestly you question those beliefs, the less power their profile has. Because the real healing won't come from understanding them, or the new person, in more detail. It will come from finally turning that same obsessive attention toward yourself, not to tear yourself apart, but to meet the parts of you that still believe you had to be chosen to be worthy at all. Grieving the fantasy. You didn't just lose them, you lost the life. You imagine when you finally turn that attention toward yourself, something else comes into focus too. You didn't just lose them. You lost the life you were quietly building in your mind with them. The version of you that woke up next to their face. The version of your nights that ended in their arms instead of in silence. It's not just about a person walking away. It's about the future that walked away with them. All those tiny scenes you rehearsed without even meaning to. Growing old together, arguing over which side of the bed. Shared holidays where you knew exactly whose family you'd visit first. inside jokes that would last for years, maybe children with their eyes, trips you hadn't booked yet, but could already feel, the airport coffee, their hand on your back, the hotel curtains letting in morning light. You start to realize you were not only loving who they were, you were loving who you hoped both of you would become. The version of them who would finally heal their wounds. The version of you who would finally stop feeling second best because this time you were chosen for good. What scares me most is how easily we confuse that imagined life with reality, how deeply we can grieve something that never actually happened. The hardest part is that your body doesn't care whether those birthdays, trips, and late night talks were real or not. It hurts the same. Your mourning anniversaries that will never come, arguments you would have worked through, apologies they were never going to say. You're grieving the conversation where they finally understood you, the night where everything clicked, the quiet Sunday mornings that only ever existed in your mind. And it's confusing, isn't it? To feel more broken now than you did during the relationship itself. To cry harder over the absence of a future than you ever did over the reality you were actually living. But loss of fantasy can hit even harder than loss of reality, because the fantasy never disappointed you. It never forgot to text back. It never chose someone else. There's nothing wrong with you for grieving that hard. That doesn't make you delusional or weak. It just means you are someone who loves deeply, who attaches meaning to dreams, who lets hope color in the empty spaces of your nights. Many of us do. Research even shows we tend to overestimate how much the other person was really there with us because our inner world is so vivid. If you want a gentle way to untangle this, try this. Write 2 lists. On one side, what you actually had with them, the messages, the patterns, the way you felt after most nights. On the other side, what you only imagined, the versions of them and of you that never quite arrived. Look at both, notice the gap. As long as you haven't looked at that difference, you'll keep grieving them as if they were your whole future. But if you can see the space between fantasy and reality, you start to ask a different question. If that imagined life is gone, what kind of future do you want to imagine now, with you at the center instead of them? Letting go of "if I had just." Releasing the illusion you could have saved it. When you put yourself back at the center, something else shows up almost immediately. The rewind button in your mind. Suddenly you're back in that one fight, hearing your own voice get sharp and shaky, wishing you had stayed calm. You're replaying the night you almost said no to them coming over, but you did not. The weekend you felt that knot in your chest and ignored it instead of setting a boundary. You start building a whole alternate version of your love story in your head. If I had just listened to my gut, if I had just stayed quiet, if I had just given them more space, if I had just loved them better. It's not just about remembering. It's like putting yourself on trial, using every memory as evidence that you ruined everything. What scares me most is how quickly we turn our own tenderness into a weapon, using our softest moments as proof that we were the problem. Those "if I had just" thoughts feel powerful. Do you notice that? They make it seem like you were the one holding the steering wheel the whole time. If it was your fault, then maybe you could have fixed it. Maybe you still could. That illusion of control feels safer than facing the reality that they had limitations you could never love them out of. The hardest part is admitting that no amount of overgiving can make someone ready to stay who was never actually ready. Relationships do not end because of one bad night or one imperfect conversation. They end because of patterns, capacity, timing, emotional availability. You can change a sentence. You cannot change someone's readiness to choose you. One less argument, one more apology, one extra act of care would not turn an inconsistent, confused person into a steady partner. That doesn't make you foolish for trying. It just means you were human, loving with what you knew at the time. So instead of asking, "if I had just given more, would they have stayed?" Try a different question. If they had been able to meet me halfway, would this still have ended like this? Sit with that. If they had communicated clearly, if they had honored your heart, if they had chosen you out loud, would one fight really have undone it? Or does that reveal that the foundation was already cracked? Here's a simple practice. The next time your mind whispers, if I had just, answer it with, and even then, they still had a choice. If I had just been calmer, and even then, they still had a choice. If I had just been less needy, and even then, they still had a choice. Repeat it until it starts to sink in that you were not the only person in that relationship. There's nothing wrong with feeling regret. Regret is a normal part of grief, especially at night when the silence gets loud and you feel most alone. But punishing yourself will not bring them back. It will not make you safer next time. As long as you haven't learned anything new, you'll just keep bleeding in the same place. The shift is moving from trying to fix the past to asking, how do I protect my future self? Not by closing your heart, but by learning boundaries, by trusting your own discomfort, by believing that being chosen should feel calm instead of like a constant test. And that is where we're going next. When being chosen becomes your oxygen, understanding your deepest fear. Calm sounds nice in theory, but if you're honest, being chosen by them didn't feel calm at all. It felt like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath for years. Like their yes was oxygen, and if they ever took it back, you'd be left gasping in the dark again. It wasn't just a relationship, it was proof. Proof that you weren't the one always almost picked. Proof that you were, at last, worthy of staying. Every good morning text, every night you fell asleep on the phone, every time they said, I want you, settled something inside you that had been shaking for a long time. You didn't just love them, you needed what their love seemed to say about you. For a lot of people, especially if you lean anxious in love, romantic attention becomes more than affection. It becomes your main source of validation, safety, even identity. You start building your sense of self around whether someone is choosing you that day. Are they replying fast? Do they sound distant? Are they posting someone else? Your whole nervous system rises and falls with their mood. The hardest part is admitting that it's not just about losing them. It's not just about the nights alone now, or the silence on your phone. It's about losing that feeling of being picked out of everyone and called special. The feeling of, out of all the people in the world, they wanted me. When they choose someone else, it doesn't just hurt your heart. It shakes that entire story. Where does that story even come from? Often it starts early. Maybe you had a parent who was warm one day and cold the next, so love felt like something you had to earn by guessing right. Maybe you grew up in a house where no one really asked how you felt, as long as you behaved. Maybe you were compared to a sibling who was smarter, louder, easier to love. Or you only got praise when you performed, when you got the grades, when you made everyone else comfortable. Those patterns quietly teach you, I am lovable when I'm useful, when I'm impressive, when I'm chosen, instead of, I am lovable because I exist. So of course, when someone finally chooses you, you cling. You overgive. You over-explain every misunderstanding. You over-apologize for needs that aren't actually wrong. That doesn't make you pathetic. It just means you are trying to protect the one feeling that made you feel safe, being chosen. What scares me most is how invisible this can be. You think you're just trying to save the relationship, but really, you're trying to save your proof of worth. You start bending, shrinking, performing, hoping they'll stay so you don't have to face that old, lonely question. If they don't want me, what does that say about me? So let me ask you gently, when you imagine being loved, do you picture being relaxed and yourself or constantly proving and performing? Do you see someone meeting you where you are, or are you running laps to deserve their attention? As long as you haven't looked at that image honestly, love will keep feeling like a test You're terrified to fail. Where we're going next is a different kind of love story. One where your oxygen isn't one person's choice. One where you start learning how to choose yourself in small, consistent ways so that being picked feels like a gift, not a lifeline you're afraid to lose. Separating your worth from their choice, you are not a rejected application. And here's where it gets confusing, right? Because if their choice isn't your oxygen, then what does it actually mean when they walk away and choose someone else instead of you? When you gave them everything you knew how to give, and they still looked at another person and said, "That one." It feels like a stamp, like a denied application, like they read your whole file and decided you weren't worth hiring for the job of being loved. But love doesn't work like a performance review. Their choice is more like one company not hiring you. It hurts, it's disappointing. You question yourself, but it doesn't mean you have no skills. It just means you weren't the right fit for that particular role at that particular place, with that particular manager and their very specific fears and needs. Another place could look at the exact same resume and wonder how they got so lucky. The hardest part is how heartbreak makes their opinion feel like the ultimate truth. As if the moment they didn't choose you, they became the judge and jury of your lovability. You start replaying every conversation as evidence. You start treating their silence like a final verdict. One person's decision begins to sound louder than every moment you've ever been kind, steady, patient, real. What scares me most is how quickly we hand one person the power to define our entire value, as if they see more of us than we see of ourselves, as if their temporary front row seat means they suddenly understand your soul better than you do. But they don't live inside your nights. They don't sit with you in the silence when you're trying so hard not to go numb. They don't see the way you still choose love even after being hurt. The truth is, people don't choose partners only based on goodness or effort. It's not just about who loved more or tried harder. People choose from their wounds, their fears, their timing, their readiness. Someone who is terrified of intimacy might pick a partner who feels emotionally lighter, less intense, because deep connection scares them. Someone who grew up in chaos might feel strangely safe with someone unpredictable, because that storm feels familiar. That doesn't make you wrong for being deep or steady. It just means their nervous system was chasing something else. So when your mind says, "They replaced me because I wasn't enough," I want you to practice a different line. Their choice is information about them, not a verdict on me. Say it when you see their new partner. Say it when the lonely night hits and you feel like the discarded one. Say it when you're tempted to beg the past to come back. Their choice is information about them, not a verdict on you. If you need something concrete, grab a journal and gently ask yourself, what are 3 qualities I brought into that relationship that I'm proud of, regardless of how it ended? Maybe it's the way you listened, the way you stayed honest, the way you still had hope. Write them down. Let them be real. Because if your worth isn't determined by who stays or leaves, then where does it come from? And how do you start to feel it again in a way that doesn't crumble when someone else changes their mind? The parts of you that overgave. Meeting your inner caretaker, pleaser, and protector. Maybe this is where you start to see something you've never really looked at before. The version of you who gave everything. The one who stayed up at night, replaying every moment, asking what you did wrong. The one who kept loving harder every time you felt them pulling away. That part of you wasn't weak or pathetic. That doesn't make you desperate. It just means a very old part of you was trying very hard to keep you safe and loved. The hardest part is realizing that the overgiving you hate in yourself was actually protection. Inside you, there's a caretaker, a pleaser, and a protector, even if you don't call them that. The caretaker believes love means fixing and soothing. If I can heal their hurt, they'll never leave. The pleaser believes love means never upsetting anyone. If I'm easy and low maintenance, I'll finally be chosen. The protector believes if you overgive, you can prevent abandonment. If I do enough, they won't replace me. None of these parts are trying to ruin your life. They're trying to save it. Think about how they showed up with this person. The caretaker said yes when you meant no, because you saw their stress and pushed your own needs into silence. You stayed up late on the phone, listened to every crisis, talked them through their ex, their job, their family, even when you were exhausted and lonely beside your own unanswered needs. Not because you were naive, but because you hoped love would finally stay if you were the one who could handle everything. The pleaser apologized for things that weren't your fault. You said, "It's okay, I understand," when it wasn't okay at all. You laughed off comments that hurt you. You pretended you were fine with seeing how it goes when you wanted a commitment. You swallowed every boundary that might make them uncomfortable, because what scares me most is how easily we trade our own self-respect just to avoid feeling alone again. And the protector? That's the one who panicked at any sign of distance. The double texts, the over-explaining, the way you rushed to fix every tiny conflict before they could change their mind about you. It's not just about being too much. It's about a younger you who learned that closeness is fragile and can disappear overnight. The hardest part is that these parts were formed long before this relationship. Maybe in a house where you had to be the responsible one. Maybe with a parent whose moods you managed. Maybe in a childhood where love felt conditional, so you adapted to survive emotionally. There's nothing wrong with that child. They did what they had to do. So, which one feels most familiar to you? The one who always tries harder? The one who never complains? Or the one who feels their chest tighten in terror when someone takes a little longer to reply? You don't have to judge your answer, just notice it. If you can, imagine sitting in a quiet room with that caretaker, pleaser, or protector. See them as younger than you, maybe smaller, maybe tired. Instead of attacking them for not being enough, you sit beside them. You say, "Thank you for trying to help me. Thank you for keeping me from going numb. You don't have to work so hard tonight." You might feel silly, but notice what softens in you when you stop calling yourself pathetic and start seeing yourself as protected. You don't have to get rid of these parts. They're not the enemy. They just shouldn't be driving your love life anymore. The goal is to lead them with a wiser, calmer self who doesn't believe love has to be earned through exhaustion. A self who can say, "I know you're scared, but we're not going to beg to be chosen." Because the next step isn't just setting limits with other people. It's learning how to set limits with these parts of you that think overgiving is the only way to stay safe. And when you can do that, the way you love starts to change. Learning to say enough before you're empty. The first boundaries after heartbreak. So this is where love starts to look different. Not in some dramatic moment where you slam a door and never look back, but in the quiet decision to stop pouring yourself out until there's nothing left. Learning to say enough before you're empty. Boundaries sound complicated, but they're simple. They're just the lines that protect your energy, your time, and your heart, so you don't have to completely empty yourself to feel loved. They're the difference between "I'll do anything so you don't leave" and "I'll give what I can without abandoning myself." It's not just about pushing people away, it's about finally staying with you. The hardest part is, if you're used to overgiving, even the smallest no can feel like a betrayal. Saying, "That doesn't work for me," feels like you're asking to be left. Your chest tightens, your mind starts listing all the ways you could be more flexible, more understanding, less of a burden. You start to feel wrong just for having a limit at all. What scares me most is how many of us learned that the only way to keep love is to never be a burden, to never ask for too much, to never disappoint. You were trained to believe that if someone is even slightly uncomfortable, you'll be punished with distance, with silence, with being replaced. No wonder your whole body panics at the idea of protecting yourself, so you start small. Not with some huge confrontation, but with tiny, gentle experiments. You're tired, the night has been long, and a message comes in. Instead of replying in 30 seconds, you let yourself answer in 30 minutes. Or tomorrow. You feel the urge to send a long explanation for a simple choice, and you practice saying, "I can't make it tonight," and leaving it there. You notice a conversation turning draining, your chest getting tight, and you give yourself permission to say, "I'm going to head out," even if part of you wants to stay to keep them comfortable. Boundaries are not walls. Walls say, "No one gets in." Boundaries are more like doors with handles on your side, letting you choose who and what comes in, and how far. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming intentional. That doesn't make you selfish. It just means you're finally allowed to matter in your own life. Sometimes the first boundaries aren't with other people at all. They're with you. You limit how often you check their social media, even though your fingers itch to open the app. You catch yourself replaying the same argument in your head for an hour, and you gently say, "We're not going there again tonight," and put on a song or step outside. You notice it's past midnight and you're sacrificing sleep just to think about them, and you decide, just for tonight, to choose rest over rumination. You will feel guilty. You will feel like you're doing something wrong. That guilt is not proof that you're bad. It's proof that you're doing something new. As long as you haven't spent a lifetime honoring your own limits, your nervous system will protest when you start. But each small boundary is a message to your body. We don't have to disappear to be loved. We don't have to bleed to be chosen. And the more you practice, the more your hope slowly shifts. From hoping they come back, to hoping you never abandon yourself like that again. Rebuilding trust in yourself. You didn't fail, you just overrode your own signals. Rebuilding that bridge with yourself starts here, in this quiet place after the storm, where the room finally stops spinning and the silence gets loud. This is where another fear creeps in at night. Not just, will I ever be loved, but can I even trust myself to choose love again? You gave someone everything, and they still chose someone else. How are you supposed to trust your own judgment after that? You start telling yourself a story. I must be broken. I pick people who leave. I can't trust myself. It feels logical, almost responsible, to blame your own chooser. But what if it's not just about your judgment being bad? What if, for most of your life, you were trained to distrust your own discomfort, to soften your own hurt, to prioritize their feelings over your intuition? That doesn't make you foolish. It just means you survive by abandoning your own signals. Think back, gently, not to punish yourself, but to understand. Remember the tightness in your chest when they started pulling away, and you felt it before you could explain it. Remember the sinking feeling when your boundary was crossed, when they canceled again, flirted with other people in front of you, raised their voice, and you told yourself, "It's not a big deal, they're just stressed." Your body felt the truth before your mind would admit it. Did you hear the quiet voice that whispered, "This doesn't feel right," and then immediately drown it out with, "But I love them"? What if I'm asking for too much? The hardest part is admitting there were moments you minimized your own pain just to keep the relationship alive. Moments you swallowed tears in the car so you would not ruin the night. Moments you comforted them after they hurt you because their guilt felt heavier than your wound. Overgivers become experts at gaslighting themselves. I'm too sensitive. I should be more understanding. Other people would be fine with this. You start defending the person who is hurting you and cross-examining the part of you that is simply trying to keep you safe. There's nothing wrong with you for doing that. You are trying to protect love, even at the cost of yourself. What scares me most is how easy it is to confuse self-abandonment with loyalty. So here's a small exercise, if you feel ready. Write down 3 moments when your body or emotions tried to warn you. The knot in your stomach, the headache after every fight, the numbness that crept in. Then write what you told yourself instead in that moment. Be honest, but be kind. Can you see how hard you are working to stay chosen? Noticing these memories now is not about blaming your past self. It's about honoring how much you wanted love, how much hope you carried, and promising that next time, you will not leave yourself alone in the relationship. As long as you haven't gone numb, you can rebuild trust. Every time you validate your own feelings now, every time you say, "That hurt and that matters," you're quietly rebuilding the bridge between you and you. And that bridge is what will guide you towards safer love next time, even when the old patterns call you back. Will I ever be loved without having to earn it? And once that bridge is there, another question usually rises out of the silence. Will I ever be loved without having to earn it? Not just appreciated when I'm useful, not just praised when I'm strong, but loved on the nights I'm tired, confused, and not performing for anyone. Underneath all the overgiving, there's a very quiet fear. If I stop fixing, if I stop proving, if I stop giving everything, will anyone stay? If I'm not the one who always understands, always forgives, always shows up, do I still get to be chosen? Or does love walk out the moment I put the weight down and just let myself be human? If you grew up in a house where affection showed up with your report card, or where being good meant being quiet, helpful, low maintenance, it makes sense that you'd assume romantic love works the same way. The hardest part is, you didn't just learn rules, you built an identity around them. You start to believe you are lovable because you are useful, because you are easy, because you are the one who doesn't complain. And that doesn't make you weak, it just means you adapted to survive. What scares me most is how many of us have never actually experienced being fully ourselves in a relationship. We've been versions, the calm one, the strong one, the understanding one. So when we say we want unconditional love, we're often dreaming about something we've never actually felt in our own body. How do you even hope for what you've never seen? How do you trust a kind of love that has never stayed through your mess? It's not just about more affection or nicer words. Conditional affection says, I'm close to you when you're pleasing me, when you're impressive, when you agree. Secure love says, I'm here with you even when you're not at your best, even when you're scared or wrong or not sure who you are today. No human love is perfectly unconditional, but there are relationships where you don't have to constantly audition to keep your place. Imagine, just for a moment, a version of love where you can have bad days and not be punished with distance. Where you can say no without being guilted, disagree without being abandoned, cry without being told you're too much. Can you picture someone seeing all of that and still choosing you at the end of the night? Not because you held everything together, but because you let yourself be real? To move towards that, you don't start by handing your whole unfiltered self to the next person you date. You start smaller. A tiny experiment. In one relationship that already feels relatively safe, a friend, a sibling, a therapist, practice being 5% more honest. Say, actually that hurt, or I'm more tired than I've been letting on, and then watch what happens. Do they stay? Do they adjust? Or do they disappear? There's nothing wrong with being afraid of that experiment. But as long as you haven't gone numb, you can still learn from it. Because the more you allow yourself to be seen as you are, the more you'll be able to recognize and receive the kind of love that doesn't demand your exhaustion as proof. And slowly, you'll stop mistaking the feeling of working for love for the feeling of being loved. Learning to receive why it feels so uncomfortable when love comes toward you, and slowly, you'll stop mistaking the feeling of working for love for the feeling of being loved. But here's the strange part. No one warns you about. The moment love actually starts to move toward you, you might not know what to do with it. Have you noticed that? You gave someone everything, but when anyone tries to give even a little bit back, your whole body tenses. They say, "You're really thoughtful, you know that?" And you laugh it off. Change the subject. Pretend you did nothing special. They ask, "How are you, really?" And you feel that small panic rise, so you say, "I'm fine, it's nothing." even when the night before you were crying into your pillow, feeling lonely and wrong and completely unseen. It's not just about being modest. It's like being on the receiving end makes you feel exposed, almost unsafe. There's a paradox here. You are willing to bleed for love, to overgive, to stay up late, helping, listening, fixing. Yet when someone offers you comfort or help, or even a simple ride home, something in you whispers, "Be careful." Why does it feel so suspicious? Why does kindness feel like a debt you now owe? If you listen closely, you can hear the old beliefs humming underneath. I'm the strong one. I'm the fixer. If I need too much, they'll leave. These stories kept you alive when love felt unstable. They taught you that your safety was in being useful, not in being held. So receiving starts to feel dangerous. Like if you relax into it, you'll be dropped. The hardest part is admitting that a part of you doesn't quite believe you're allowed to be cared for without paying it back immediately. So you deflect compliments. You rush to say, "You too," or "It's nothing," instead of letting their words land. You downplay your hurt so no one worries. You insist you're okay so you don't risk being too much. That doesn't make you broken. It just means your nervous system learned that needing is risky. What scares me most is how easy it is to call that pattern humility when it's actually fear. But in a healthy relationship, love is a flow, not a one-way stream. Giving isn't proof you're worthy. Receiving isn't taking advantage. It's allowing connection. It's letting someone see that you also get tired, also feel alone at night, also need a soft place to fall. You start small. When someone offers something tiny, help with a task, a kind word, a listening ear, pause. Feel the urge to wave it away. Then take a slow breath, meet their eyes if you can, and simply say, "Thank you," without scrambling to return the favor. That moment of stillness will feel wrong at first, almost like you're stealing. There's nothing wrong with that discomfort. It's a sign you're stretching into a new way of relating, not proof you're doing it wrong. As long as you haven't shut down completely, you can practice. Because the more you can receive, the less you'll feel pressured to overgive just to keep someone close, and the more room you'll have for the kind of future love that meets you halfway instead of asking you to carry it all. Redefining everything, from losing yourself to loving yourself. You keep hearing that sentence in your head like a verdict. I gave them everything. It echoes in the silence at night, when you're alone in your room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment you showed up and wondering, what was missing? What more could I have done? But when you say everything, what do you really mean? You're not just talking about gifts or favors. You're talking about the nights you stayed awake so they didn't feel lonely. The way you bent your schedule, your needs, your body, your boundaries. The dreams you put on hold, the self-respect you quietly set aside, so they wouldn't feel wrong for taking more than they gave. The hardest part is, there's nothing wrong with the fact that you can love that fully. That doesn't make you weak or desperate. It just means your heart is wired for depth, for devotion, for showing up all the way. The problem wasn't that you loved too much. The problem was that you gave everything you had, and almost nothing you needed. You gave your reassurance, but not your honest, "This hurts." You gave your patience, but not your limit. You gave your loyalty, but not your right to be chosen back. You started carrying both sides of the relationship, hoping that if you held on tight enough, they would finally feel how safe love could be with you. What scares me most is how normal that can start to feel, especially if you're used to chasing people who are half in, half out. You start thinking love is supposed to hurt like this. You start believing that being picked eventually will make up for all the times you abandon yourself along the way. But it's not just about giving less in the future. It's about giving differently. Giving from a place where you're inside the circle of your own care, not standing outside of it, handing everything through the fence to someone else. What if everything didn't mean your sleep, your peace, your self-worth? What if everything meant honesty, presence, kindness, shared effort, and mutual respect? And right beside that, self-respect, self-care, and self-trust. In healthy love, you don't have to choose between them and you. Real intimacy makes room for both hearts, both histories, both needs. You can say, I love you, and also, I can't cross that line. You can stay soft without going missing inside your own life. You don't have to harden or become cold to protect yourself. You can stay loving and still stay on your own side. So ask yourself, maybe in your journal, if I love someone with my whole heart without losing myself, what would that look like in daily actions? Let your answers be small and specific. How you sleep, how you say no, how you let someone see you. Your ability to give deeply is not the problem. As long as you haven't shut down that part of you, there is hope. The new path forward is learning to include yourself in what you give. So the next time you offer everything, it doesn't mean disappearing. It means sharing a love where you're finally chosen too, by them and by you. Tiny acts of self-choosing, practicing the love you wanted from them, including yourself in what you give, will not happen in one dramatic moment. There probably won't be a night where you suddenly stop missing them and feel completely healed. Healing rarely arrives like that. It sneaks in through the small, almost boring ways you start choosing yourself when no one is watching. The hardest part is those moments feel so tiny that your brain wants to say, "This doesn't matter." Closing your laptop instead of checking who they just followed. Going to bed when you're tired instead of staying up in the blue light, scrolling through their new life. Eating something when you realize you feel dizzy instead of telling yourself you can wait. Stepping outside for 5 minutes when your thoughts are too loud and the silence in your room feels like it's shouting at you. It looks so ordinary that you're tempted to call it nothing. What scares me most is how easily we dismiss these choices, when they're actually how you reteach your nervous system that you matter. Every time you give your body rest, instead of another hit of hurt from their profile, you send a tiny message. I'm on my own side. Every time you drink water before you reread old messages or let yourself cry instead of numbing out, you start building a different story about what your pain deserves. If you want something simple to hold on to, try asking yourself once a day, what is one small way I can be on my own side today? Just one. Emotionally, it might be letting yourself admit, I miss them, without adding, I'm so pathetic. Physically, it might be stretching your shoulders after work instead of collapsing straight into your phone. Socially, it might be replying to the friend you keep ignoring because you feel too lonely to be seen. It's not just about self-care routines. It's about practicing, in tiny doses, the kind of love you kept trying to give away. There's nothing wrong with using the way you treated them as a template. You sent them long, thoughtful messages. Try writing one kind paragraph to yourself in your notes app before bed. You plan dates around what they enjoyed. Try planning one small thing you enjoy this week, even if you go alone. You showed up for them when you were exhausted. Try showing up for your own needs when you're tired of yourself, when you feel like you don't deserve gentleness. That doesn't make you selfish. It just means you stop abandoning yourself. Some days, self-choosing will not look impressive. It might simply mean you catch the impulse to say something cruel to yourself in the mirror. And, for once, you don't. You remember their name and the night they left, and instead of spiraling, you put a hand on your chest and stay with the ache for 30 seconds. That counts. As long as you haven't gone numb, there is still room to practice a softer way of being with yourself. These tiny acts are not a consolation prize because they didn't choose you. They are the foundation that lets you receive healthier love later without shrinking, without begging, without confusing chaos with connection. You're teaching yourself that your needs are not an inconvenience. They are part of the relationship. And slowly, almost quietly, you start to notice a shift. You feel a little less desperate for someone else to rescue you, and a little more curious about who you're becoming when you rescue yourself. That curiosity is where the next part of your story begins. Seeing their new relationship without making it your mirror. That curiosity is where the next part of your story begins. But I know there's a scene that keeps dragging you back to the old one. It's that image of them with someone else. The photo you wish you had never seen. The update you wish had never reached you. Your chest drops, your stomach twists, and for a moment it feels like all the work you've done to heal just vanished. It didn't. The hardest part is realizing that being triggered doesn't erase your progress. It just means there is still love, still grief, still tenderness in you. Seeing their new relationship and feeling that sharp, familiar hurt doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you dramatic. And it definitely doesn't mean you failed at moving on. It just means your heart remembers. It remembers the fantasy, the almost, the future you quietly built in the dark. When you see them smiling with someone else, your mind wants to turn it into a report card. You start grading yourself without even noticing. If they can do this with them, why not with me? Was I too much? Not enough. Did I love them wrong? But their new relationship is not an exam you failed. It is simply the next chapter in their story, and their story has now separated from yours. Two people can walk out of the same night and head toward completely different mornings. What scares me most is how quickly you start using their choices as a mirror for your worth. Every post becomes data. Every caption becomes a hidden message about what you lacked. But their life is no longer your research project. It's not just about trying not to care. It's about understanding that what they do now is no longer information you need to interpret your value. You are not their decision. You are your own. So when something triggers you, instead of asking, "What does this say about me?" try, "What does this remind me I still need to grieve, heal, or learn?" One question keeps you stuck in self-blame. The other invites you back to yourself. You might realize you're still grieving the fantasy more than the person. You might see how lonely you felt even while you were chosen by them. And in that moment, come back to your body. Name 5 things in the room: the chair, the window, the light on the wall, the sound in the hallway, the weight of your own hands. Feel your feet on the floor. Place a hand on your chest and notice it rising and falling. In the middle of the noise in your head, say to yourself, slowly, "I am here. I am safe." Their life is not my mirror. There's nothing wrong with needing space to protect that safety. You are allowed to mute, unfollow, or block. Not as a punishment, not as proof that you are bitter, but as an act of self-respect and nervous system care. You are allowed to choose less contact with what keeps reopening the wound. That doesn't make you petty. It makes you a person who finally understands that peace is not earned by enduring more pain. One day, their updates will feel different. Not like a knife, but like a book you once read and put back on the shelf. You'll recognize the cover, remember a few lines, maybe even feel a small ache, and then you'll go back to the chapter you're actually living. Because if their story is no longer your mirror, something softer appears in the quiet. Space. Space to ask a new question you've been afraid to touch. If you are not busy chasing their love anymore, what kind of love story do you want to write for yourself now? From "Why wasn't I enough?" to "Who am I becoming now?" Maybe you feel that question rise up again in the new quiet. Not the one about them, but the one that has been haunting you underneath every memory. Why wasn't I enough? It still stings, doesn't it? You can understand the patterns, see the red flags, name the attachment wounds, and still, at night, in the silence, that sentence can feel louder than all the healing you've done. So I want to offer you a different question, not to erase that one, but to sit beside it. Who am I becoming because of what I've survived? It's a small shift in words, but it changes the direction of your gaze. Instead of staring at the door they walked out of, you start looking at the person who is still here. You, the one who loved, who was hurt, who is somehow still trying to hope, because something has been changing, even if you don't fully feel it yet. You've started to see the difference between fantasy and reality, between the person you held in your mind and the one who actually stood in front of you. You've learned that it's not just about how intensely you want someone, it's about whether they are emotionally available, whether their actions match their words, whether the love is mutual, calm, and safe instead of chaotic and confusing. You've begun to notice your own attachment patterns, how your anxious parts overgave, overexplained, overstayed, how you chased not because there's something wrong with you, but because inconsistency felt familiar. Instead of shaming those parts, you're learning to meet them with compassion. You can say, "Of course you tried that hard. You were terrified of being left alone." That doesn't make you pathetic. It just means you cared more about connection than your own comfort. And now you're practicing something new. You're practicing boundaries, practicing self-choosing, practicing the quiet courage of not sending that last message, of not begging for clarity from someone who keeps you guessing. The hardest part is letting yourself believe that this hurt isn't proof you're unlovable, but evidence that you're being shaped into someone more grounded, more self-aware, more ready for the kind of love you actually deserve. If you can, pause with me for a moment. Imagine meeting your future self 1 year from now. Where are you sitting together? What do their eyes look like when they talk about love? What have they learned about what they will and won't accept? About the difference between being chosen and being used? About how to hold their own heart when someone else drops it? Becoming this version of you doesn't mean erasing your softness. It means carrying your softness with more protection, more discernment, more loyalty to yourself. You are not meant to turn cold to stay safe. You are meant to be warm with people who know how to hold warmth. Being left and replaced does not make you less worthy. It makes you someone who knows deeply what it feels like to give your heart, and who is now learning how to hold it too. As long as you haven't gone numb, love hasn't given up on you. You may not see it yet, but every small act of staying with yourself now is already answering the question, will I be loved? Because in the quiet, in the slow rebuilding, you are slowly, quietly learning to love you. And that is where the next part of this story begins. Will I ever be loved the way I love? And that is where the next part of this story begins. Because underneath everything you've been asking, there's really one question, sitting in the dark with you at night. Will I ever be loved the way I love? You gave someone everything you knew how to give, and they still chose someone else. The hardest part is, your brain keeps replaying that as proof that love doesn't work for you, instead of what it really was. A moment that revealed their capacity, not your worth. Giving someone everything was never a guarantee they'd choose you. Not because you did it wrong, but because their choice was always going to be filtered through their own wounds, their attachment style, their fear of intimacy, their hunger for validation. Someone who is emotionally unavailable can stand in front of a waterfall of love and still feel thirsty. That doesn't make you too much or not enough. It just means they weren't able to receive what was in your hands. Being replaced, rejected, or left for someone else feels like a verdict. It feels like the universe circled your name in red and wrote, "Not lovable." But what if their decision was just a snapshot of where they are in their journey? What if it showed you what they could tolerate, not what you deserved? Their choice said, "This is the level of closeness I can handle," not, "This is all you're worth." That difference matters, even if the silence after they leave still hurts. We've walked through anxious attachment, through chasing people who keep you at arm's length, through mistaking intensity for safety. You started to see how you were grieving not only the person, but the fantasy of who they might become if your love finally healed them. It's not just about bad choices or being naive. These patterns were about survival. They were the ways you tried to avoid being alone, the ways you tried to earn what should have been given freely. So the question shifts now. Instead of, why wasn't I enough for them? Try, What kind of love actually feels safe, mutual, and sustainable for me? What does it feel like in your body when someone is consistent, when you don't have to beg, when you're chosen in the daylight, not just in late-night messages? As long as you haven't stopped asking those questions, you're already moving toward a different kind of story. If you want something concrete, you start with a pen and a piece of paper. Write a letter to yourself from the perspective of someone who truly loves you, not idealizes you, sees you. Let that voice name what you gave, what you learned, what you carried alone for too long, and what you now deserve. Reciprocity, clarity, gentleness, accountability. Read it back on the nights the old story gets loud. I know there's a fear that you'll never be loved like you love. What scares me most is how easily that fear can become an identity. But the very fact that you can love this deeply is not a curse, it's a preview. With someone emotionally available, that same depth becomes co-created safety instead of one-sided ache. Your tenderness was never the problem. The container it was poured into was. From here, rebuilding trust starts with you. Trusting your own feelings, trusting your boundaries when your body says, "This doesn't feel right." Trusting your intuition when someone's words and actions don't match. Trust and love becomes less about finding a perfect person and more about knowing you can walk away when it's not mutual, even if you feel lonely in the silence afterward. So for this next season, choose yourself with the same devotion you once reserved only for them. In small daily ways, going to bed when you're exhausted instead of waiting for their message, telling the truth about what you need instead of shrinking, soothing yourself kindly when old memories sting instead of calling it weakness. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen. Just do not abandon yourself to get there. Carry this with you. You were not chosen by them, but you are still worthy of being chosen again and again, including by yourself. Their ending is not the final verdict on your love story. It is a chapter that taught you what hurts, what heals, what you will no longer accept. The book is still being written, and somewhere ahead, there is a night where the love you give and the love you receive finally look each other in the eye and recognize they were always meant to meet.